Vogel 10.
Or 11.
C2.
3.
Right 4.
Con number 5.
Under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Be happy to for the city council meetings on June 26th. Councilor D. Here. Councilor Cameron.
Here.
Councilor Donahue.
Present.
Councilor Khan.
Present.
Councilor Lane. Here. Councilor McCauley.
Here.
Councilor Preston.
Here.
Councilor Vogel. Present. Councilor Wallace is absent. Councilor White.
Here.
And Councilor Shannon.
Present.
And present, one absent, we have a quorum.
All right, late files.
The late files are 4. The first two are appointments 414, 415. One is Charles Palmisano, 3 Jefferson Court, the planning board, and Stephen H. Bradbury III as emergency management director. There's a revised exhibit A that goes along with order 455, which is the ACO intermunicipal agreement, and order 470, which is market landing park gap funding. Those are the 4.
Rules and took away files.
Second.
Yeah, I'll be opposing. I want to say that putting in order 470 as a late file is very insulting, both to the committee members and to the public. We sat here in a meeting and we had it. And we talked about it, and the outcome was to keep it in committee. And I think it's really insulting to take it out. So I'll be opposed. Thank you.
Councilor Donahue.
Thank you, President. I will be standing in favor of this. I really was very troubled. I couldn't Zoom on the meeting on Thursday due to a lack of connection on the city's end. Had I been there, I would have absolutely advocated for this to be coming out. So I don't find this insulting. I am grateful, and I do feel that this is time sensitive. So I am very much in favor and appreciate it and having the opportunity to speak to it as well. Thank you.
Councilor.
I'm going to strongly oppose this. Anything with the word funding and market landing parks should be put on hold for now. There's things that are to get attention that I just can't even go describe. There's so many other things that we could do in the city with money instead of market landing park. There's 4 acres of lawn that we're going to overspend. So again, I'm going to echo my past concern. We've spent enough already on market landing park for now. Time to click pause and see where we're at in a couple of years.
Discussion. All those in favor of waiving the rules, and accepting the late file, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No. Roll call.
Roll call.
Okay, motion in favor of waiving the rules. Councilor Z.
No.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
No.
Councilor McCauley.
No.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace is absent. Councilor Wright.
Yeah.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
motion passed.
All right, public comment. All right, for those on Zoom, please raise your hand if you want to speak tonight while the clerk goes to get the sheet on the door. If there are any folks who want to speak tonight, please raise your Zoom hand now. Once the clerk gets back, I'll close the Zoom hand. So if there's anyone here from Zoom who wants to speak tonight, please raise your hand now. I don't see any hands from the attendees and Zooms. I'm assuming there's no one on Zoom that wants to speak in public comments. All right, we have 5 hands in house, so we'll have the first person to speak is Nicholas Metcalf.
The whole screen.
Mr. Metcalf.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'm Nicholas Metcalf, 27 Fair Street. I'm a member of the Committee of the Water Branch, known as Cal, not House Chair. I attended the meeting last Thursday here in this room, and the subject of inflation came up. I just wanted to make one comment. I think the Federal Reserve Board Chairman said recently, inflation is necessary for the American economy to run properly. A certain amount of inflation is okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So I think we should bear that in mind. Now, the story of this water plant, which I'm talking about tonight, a lot of it has to do with this room. This starts right over there. That's Peter Matthews on the lower level. First, later, when I got involved, he came there. He ran against Ed Nolan, who was in favor of a hotel on the waterfront. And the second time he ran, he switched his opinion and came around to an open waterfront. And he won. And many of us think that the reason he won was because he became open waterfront. So we actually should slide there between Mary Nolan and Lisa Mead, the next one. Lisa Mead was our legal attorney for the Committee of the Open Waterfront. The story is right here. Chris Sullivan, who was only there for a short time, was very much in favor of open waterfront. Mary Carrier, right there, one of the real heroes of the open waterfront. When she became mayor, there were plans out there to put buildings on the waterfront. He had none of it. He said, I'm scrapping the whole thing. I want an open waterfront and I want a park. She'll always be remembered for that, Tommy. Al Lavender, who sadly died in a plane crash about 5 years ago, he was very much open waterfront. And so it goes all the way on to the end of Dawn Holiday. So the first time she ran, it was very much open waterfront. There's no question about that. That's the history. It's right here in this room, so much of this. Now, during the time that we went from there to there, somewhere in the middle, we, the Committee of the Open Waterfront, with our 2 litigants, Sonia Marashland and Chris Snow.
Mr. Metcalf, you have 10 seconds.
Sorry?
And sir.
Oh, we went all the way to the Supreme Court of Massachusetts. That's not to be forgotten. All right, I'm going to cut off. All I want to say is, please don't kill it. There's so much effort that's gone in this of so many years. So many people go so many hours to it. It's time to go ahead, even if you're part of it. Please do it tonight. I beg you. Thank you.
Thank you, Metcalf. I can't tell if the person who signed in number 2 crossed their name off.
I do not.
Okay.
I'm Dylan. Thank you. I would like to,
Your name and address, please.
I am Dylan Edward Thompson at 25 Temple Street, apartment 510, Newburyport. I would like to propose an amendment to the agenda, specifically in the planning and development section, something. In the first section, I would like to, for purposes of renovating the ground school with funding from the venture build challenge. And that's all. That's all. I would just like to propose that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Ed Neumer.
My name is Ed Neumer. I live at 8 Dorothy P. Lucy Drive. I've lived here for about a year. I owned the house a little bit before that. After 35 years in Newburyport, I'm retired. I'm very interested in becoming part of the historical commission. I've listened in on a couple of the meetings and believe that I can offer a lot of value. I have a high degree of interest, and I'm retired at the time to put it in.
Thank you very much.
Next is Jane Smith.
Jane Snow, I'm Rockland Street. I was really saddened to see Market Landing Park be on the agenda. I was at the Thursday meeting and I have my notes. There are no notes from the meeting online. And it said that if they tried to bring it up on Monday, we wouldn't have the 6 votes. And so therefore we recommend that we keep it in committee. And we needed to digest this information, and over the weekend wasn't enough. And so forth and so on. And I'm concerned about the process. I am not opposed to Market Landing Park, so let's not put any words in my mouth. I believe that we're trying desperately to find a way in a spot in which we can move this project, which is going to become very expensive, forward. But you also owe to the residents the opportunity to know that it's happening, A, because as far as I know, there was nothing from the council or whatever put out to anyone that they even knew that this was coming on tonight's agenda, because I certainly didn't until about 4:30 this afternoon. And therefore, I really do think that when you're asking the residents to fund a project like this, and we have more, then they need to be able to know, A, that the project is there and what it's gonna cost, and B, they have every right to be able to speak on it. It isn't just 11 councilors, it's the residents. And I'm sure not one of you got a call from a resident because they didn't even know. So I'm asking you to follow the process. And I don't know how, if there's a way to do this, but it was left in committee. We even asked the CPA folks to plan a meeting just in case, so they'd be ready to go. We were supposed to do the same. I see nothing on the calendar. So we knew that we were running against. And the last time I heard, and if I'm mistaken, Andy, sometimes we talk very fast. Yes, I hear the button. We could extend, we had until July to get this voted on. And I know I'm not supposed to decide, but then we need to take that time so residents have input. Thank you.
Last on the list is Charles Smith.
Hi, my name is Charles. I live at 30 Street. I'm here tonight regarding a vote on moving the amount of parking in front of my house on the corner of Fair and Spring Street. 7 years ago, I put a lot of money into a sidewalk, sidewalks around the corner on Spring on Fair Street, and there's a big problem with trucks coming down Spring, turning right on the Fair and Essex to make the deliveries to the restaurants, and then driving across my sidewalk, and it is now collapsing. So I'm just here to ask the support from the city to fix the problem now, and with the amount of spaces across the street from my house so the trucks can get around instead of going over my sidewalk, because eventually it's going to be a city issue when the sidewalk collapses. Thank you.
And that is it for the public comment. Mayor's comment.
There's stuff at an event at the high school. Can I pitch in real quick, or would you, the rules prohibited? All right, perfect. So you should have the mayor's update in front of you. Just want to flag a couple things for you real quick. I think all his, acknowledgements and thank you, and here should definitely be read on your own. But I just want to shout out that he did say that he supports the chair putting Market Landing Park on the agenda this evening. The administration believes this is the cleanest path forward to get phase 1 of the project started this year, but no costs continue to rise. Instead of rolling the dice on how costs might continue to rise next year,
We want to take advantage of the state grant opportunities that exist right now. Vote tonight, and let us see where we stand. And if we need to pivot, we'll give us that time to pivot. So we hope that a vote can be held tonight on Martin Landing Park. That's all I'll say for now. The rest, Americans, really don't know time. Thanks.
Consent agenda.
So, I would ask the clerk read into the record, the mayor's comments regarding the girls' tennis and cross teams. I think it's a tremendous event. I think it's a accomplishment. I think it's more. Thank you.
I don't know, anybody ever been to public?
I'll read it if you like.
Please, David.
So I want to have a special shout out to the 2023 Newburyport High School girls track, girls lacrosse, and girls tennis teams who all won state championships this spring. So along with the NHS boys soccer team, Newburyport won 4 state titles this year. Congrats to everybody. That was great news. Girls track, girls lacrosse, girls tennis. Anything else here? We want to make sure we cover? Fall ships this weekend.
Can I just request the administration that we have a meeting at Phillips Drive in regards to the
Yes.
progress there? Thank you.
Yeah, a question for the administration. The council voted 11-0 to push out the updated and advanced streets and sidewalk plan with accompanying safety projects to June 30th. Will we see these updates by the end of the week?
So I'm preparing a memo that's going to go to the council along with Director Emerald. The director is going to need more time to get that updated plan together. Sorry. The director is going to need a little more time to get that together. We will be updating you on where our current list stands, including the safety projects we've flagged so far. We're going to need more time to complete that list with the amount of hiring that is needed to do, with the amount of initial work that's had to happen. He will need more time on that, but it is obviously a priority of his and it's something we'll be working on. So if we need to find another date to have it completed by, we can talk about that. We will have a memo to you updating where we're at.
Is there any update in terms of Noble Street?
Everybody know what's good?
Sure, we talked about that a little bit today. We're still going through the engineering process. We're working with National Grid. I actually had to just follow up National Grid today. One of the things we're trying to do is get them to move the poles back. So a little bit more room to put the sidewalk in and do the road. But no, we're still on track to do that this year and we're just kind of still working through the process.
Any other questions?
It's great to see everyone. We go through everything, Juneteenth and
I didn't say you.
we had a great Juneteenth, so I appreciate those of you that came. That's about it. So, any other questions?
Yes, I didn't actually catch in the newspaper the filling of the positions, the DPS, the 2 leadership positions. Does that complete their leadership or are they still looking for
staffing?
For staffing?
Yeah, no, we're in good shape in staffing right now at DPS. So Tom Watkins, first day was today, I'm the business manager at DPS. And John Carey will be starting in July as a deputy director.
Okay, so we'll need to fill jobs.
So we'll need to fill John's role at the water department.
Okay, so there's one of them.
One opening.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
We're done.
So the consent agenda this evening.
You want to have motion to receive file? Madam Board?
We got it.
You want to do that later?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So the consent agenda consists of the approval of minutes for June 12th. There's 2 communications, both going to license and permits. Application 145, which is the Walk Against Domestic Violence for Sunday, October 1st. And application 146 is the 11th annual car show, August 10th, 5 to 8 p.m. No transfers, a number of appointments. First appointment is Gene Costello, 522 Merrimack Street, to the Human Rights Commission until 7/1/2026. Paula Estee, 3 Pine Street, to the Cultural Council until 7/31/2026. Roger Jones, 37 Storybook Drive, Water Sewer Commission, 7/31/2025. That's to go to Public Works and Safety. Patricia Pecknick, 4 Dove Street to the ZBA to 7/31/2024. Likewise, Lynn Shaw, 75 High Street to the ZBA until 7/31/2024. Ryan Kelly, 24 School Street to the Cultural Council until 7/31/2026. And Andrew Casson, 240 Merrimack Street, Harbor Commission until 7/31/2026. I shall also say for the record, both ZBAs are supposed to go to planning and development. We have the following items coming out. We have a number of things coming out of budget and finance. Transfers 153, 159, 160, 161. Orders 467, 459. Communication 488. Order 461. 462, 463, 464, 465, 466, and 460. Community services, the following items are coming out: communications 489 and 490, orders 455 and 468, general government, appointment 402, license and permits, communication 487, application 144, planning and development, appointment 404, public works and safety, communication 483, orders 469, and ordinance 156. And that is the consent agenda this evening.
Second.
Yeah, I'd like to remove the appointment for 12. We have
Appointment 412, Brian Kelly is out.
motion to approve as amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Moving right along, mayor's update.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Great, so that brings us to appointment 412.
Which is Brian Kelly, School Street, Cultural Council, 7/31/2026.
Thank you. Looking at his resume, et cetera, he's a resident of Byfield. And, we've done this in the past where we only have Newburyport residents. I'm sure he's a wonderful fellow. He's just not this.
What's the motion?
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
All, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
No. You got it, as a no.
Okay,
Okay, motion passes.
all right. Moving right along, no communications, transfers, or second reading appointments, order.
Order 471 is a preservation restriction. It's actually a deed with a restriction. It's an area at 21 Melvin Drive.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Next is order 472, which is the streets sidewalk loan.
Finance and committee of the whole.
Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Council Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I just wanna, there was a time when we would introduce new material and talk about it, and I do feel like it's, I do think it's a miss for the public, and I think those on the council longer remember that new business, the person gets up and explains it. And so it's just something I'm saying as we have things that are coming through that I'd like to see us consider that, reinstituting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Khan.
My brother, and it's particularly because it's a loan article, I should have to read it. So if I might, if it's okay with you, I'll read it.
Please do.
Okay. June 26, 2023, that's $6 million is appropriated to pay cost of improving, maintaining and or repairing public streets, ways, walkways, and sidewalks under the jurisdiction of the city, including without limitation, pave, set curves, stripe, regrade, and or install drainage infrastructure within the public way, and including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, and to this meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount pursuant to chapter 44, section 7.1, and pursuant to any other legal authority to issue bonds or notes of the city therefore, and that the mayor and treasurer are authorized to take any action necessary and convenient to carry out the vote. Further audit, the order of 119 that came in on June 10th, 2019, amended October 28, 2019, appropriating $6 million to maintain or repair public streets, ways, walkways, sidewalks, is hereby rescinded. Submitted, Councilor Sharif I.Z.
Thank you for reading them. All right, no ordinances, starting with committee items.
Oh, I think we did vote on the motion.
Yeah.
Budget finance and committee of the whole.
All right, so committee items, so the first one is the ad hoc market landing part, so pursuant to our rules, 7F, and I'm asking for us to bring this to the floor to continue the discussion that we had from Thursday night.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Cameron. So we did discuss this. We had John Eric in to discuss the culvert, which is the real reason that this order was put in place, because the administration and planning office is looking to reallocate the funds that we had for the culvert to use as part of the park, so that we can at least get 40% of the culvert work done and get the park started this spring. We discussed options for rearranging some of the CPC funds between the MAL and the Market Landing Park. Councilor McCauley brought up possibilities of changing some of the current funding, which is the $100 more $1 million, reallocating that back to that fund, so we could use it for further operational uses for the park going forward. We also discussed the possibility of pushing out the bottom of Maui here, so that we could use some of the funding that the CPC had already allocated. This all requires CPC to have an emergency meeting in the coming weeks, because we do need to get this voted out before the middle of June. We're going to continue the discussion tonight just to see where people's heads are. There might not be a need to continue meetings. I think some of us would actually like to see this move forward, so I'd like to continue this conversation. Councilor Polly, I'm sorry, Councilor Cameron.
Just a point of order, I think we need to vote to remove it from committee, and then just have it.
Right. So. Motion to remove from committee.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call?
Roll call on removing from committee pursuant to rule 7F. Councilor Z.
No.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane. No. Councilor McCauley.
No.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wallace is absent. Councilor Wright.
No.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The way I read it under 7F, it says upon affirmative vote of the full council, which would require 6, receiving 6, motion passed. Motion to approve.
Okay.
Discussion. Councilor Cameron.
So I'll start, and I very much hear what certain of my colleagues are saying, and I understand what you're saying. Those of us who sat at the meeting last week, just there was a lot of technical discussion, definitely about costs on the overall project, culvert. I think we had a good explanation from John Eric White. And I think at the end of that, and we did need to end that meeting with folks having other obligations kind of like left hanging a little bit. And for me, not an attempt to try to, upset my colleagues or kind of rush through anything, but I think there's a deadline here with this, the acceptance of the state grants for $800,000 that really would blow this out of the water. And I think moving forward, if you really break this down, There's several factors in this order that we've been asked to approve. It's number one, the acceptance of the state grant funding. I don't think we have a big problem with that. That's $800,000, a tiny bit under. There's number two, acceptance of the private nonprofit grant from the Coastal Trails Coalition. That's $10,000. I think the contentious part is number three, which I'll get to in a second, and number four was the appropriation of 5% construction contingency. So, I think where we focused a lot of our conversation was around the reallocation of the culvert funding. And, as we know, I forget the exact date when we voted on it, we did approve a free cash transfer, $655,000. My recollection is that it was, Newburyport who was saying we should deal with the culvert first before digging up phase one and then phase two. And as I think people know, just to kind of boil this down, we're not going to get, everything that we wanted out of the park, and we've kind of known that over the last couple of months. There definitely was some scaling back, but I think we'll make significant progress with, I think, a very strong phase one, and whether phase one gets us to 80% of what we thought we were going to get, or 85% or 90%. Definitely, the bids, the second time it was rebid, it's still significantly over. I think the delta was $980,000. But we'll get 40% of the culvert. So that reallocation, or possibility of reallocation from the 655 will get us 40% of the culvert. And as John Eric White, the city engineer, said, that would make a significant improvement. And we had two residents who've been dealing with that, amongst other folks at the bottom of Market Square for the last 1978. So I think that Mayor Sullivan would have been in office then. So I think we can get some significant progress on that, which has taken too long. And I think we get significant progress on the park, whereas Nick Metcalf said, has been debated long and hard in this chamber and other forums. So again, for me, this isn't to try to bamboozle the council, but it is really with a sensitivity around the state grant funding, where we face many other scenarios, other municipalities and elements of state government when they're getting federal dollars. You either are going to accept the money or you're not going to accept the money. And I think we should keep this moving in a forward direction.
You're muted.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll start. Okay.
Okay.
I'm good now. I won't pretend. For the audience can read lips. So yeah, that's why I brought it out. It was really that urgency. We're not able to talk amongst the 5 committee members. I did have a conversation with the committee chair, President Shand. And it was only this morning, needing to sort of get some input on what procedurally. I've had a thought that this might be an emergency preamble, but that doesn't really fit. And I think Rule 7F fit. And again, I think people have had ample opportunity to talk about, I can't tell you how many waterfront meetings I've been to over the years. We did have public comment during the committee meeting. I think people are kind of assuming that the park is moving ahead. So I think some of the passion may have died down as we're kind of getting to the nitty gritty about the money, how much we can afford, phase 2 and phase 3 and bathrooms and all that. And yes, this is not everything that we wanted, but I think it's significant progress. And I hope we can move it forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I want to speak on the motion. To me, first of all, I just want to give a little bit of history of my own. I don't think anybody on the council has spent more time in the last 8 years on the waterfront than I have. I've spent thousands of hours on it, between sitting in people's living rooms to writing up documents, to chasing the ad hoc report that led to the home rule petition eventually. So I think I know the waterfront pretty well. And one thing I've learned is that it's all in the details. That's one thing. And the second thing is that rushing has never paid off. Despite the long time that This project has been talked about. Every time we start to go, try and go a little bit faster, we leave somebody behind that ultimately ends up coming back to cost us more time and more money. This particular proposal and iteration really strains credibility. So on a number of fronts, the first one is people love to wax poetic here on the floor about process and transparency, but when it matters, it doesn't matter if you like the project or, you know, it's time sensitive because the state apparently runs the city of Newburyport, not the city council. So we've always got to be sensitive to somebody else's needs and never that of the residents. My colleague, the at-large councillor, makes an effort to explain that and misunderstands the difference between upsetting colleagues and actually what is more important, which is upsetting residents. People have a right to know. I wanted this to come out of committee on Thursday and I lost, and I accepted it because that was the outcome of the committee. So there has to be, so what's the point of committee? I don't understand, you know, the discussion about the technicalities and all that. That's actually what we try and do in committee rather than doing it here on the floor, as we're about to spend a good amount of time doing. So there's a lot of strained credibility on the process, in my opinion. The second thing is there's a lot of strained credibility on the project itself. Although one councilor may explain it as well, we're getting a lot of what we wanted, and maybe it's 80%. There's already been a forgetfulness that this project's already been whittled down. In fact, when we passed the original one on the floor here, we said, wow, this project has really come down. President, you refer to it as the backbone, I believe, of the project is how it's described. So if that was the backbone, I'm not sure what this is. Maybe this is half a bone or something like that, but it's clearly a whittled down project from where it was. So you strain credibility there. Third thing is terrible strain credibility on finance. This project has been growing and spiraling out of control for many years, getting bigger and bigger. Apparently, Sasaki is unable to estimate cost with any reasonable amount of, sort of accuracy. And nowadays, we just say, okay, 20%, 50%, 100%, it's inflation. We don't know. We just sort of shrug our shoulders. It's really strained to believe that makes sense. The fourth thing on the finance is the funding sources themselves. A great debate with the free cash. And now we're back to take the free cash into the project. And many like to point out and say, oh no, CPA is a different bucket, it won't matter. This is where it matters. And it continues on because not only can we not seem to get the project to be under control and build some grants for less than $6 million, we apparently don't have any money to care for it. And in this order, as was stated by the sponsor of this amendment or this proposal, we need another $300,000 out of the waterfront paid parking fund just to try and make it through this project. And even then, we're not sure. So with what money will we care for this beautiful park that we think that we're going to build? I am really frustrated that some get to come in at the end and sort of appear to be strong open waterfront advocates after sort of not participating heavily in the heavy duty work that it took to get here, and putting some of us in a position where we're looking at a project like this. We can't actually articulate to residents what they're getting for their money, how we're going to care for it when it's done, or anything in between. So I'm going to conclude with my first motion to amend, and I'm going to motion to amend by striking number 3 entirely from this order.
Second.
So on the motion, President, which is in order since the current motion on the floor prior was a motion to approve, I just want to state that this is one of the areas that the credibility is most strained on. I don't think we're being transparent or straightforward with expectations as far as what the culvert is or isn't going to be. The way number 3 is written, it's very, very generous in terms of its writing, but essentially what it says is we're taking the money from the drainage and sucking it into the park. And if you read the attached memo, it says in many words essentially the same thing. And as I stated in the committee meeting last Thursday, the culvert was argued to be a necessity prior to the construction of phase 1. We'd be a fool not to do it. It's essentially the way that it was described. And now all of a sudden the cost savings are meager, if any, and the project doesn't really need to be done. The residents who were here last Thursday, business owners in particular, asked for a commitment that the rest would be done. No one can offer that commitment. Certainly nobody on the city council can. And I think it strains credibility to do so. I have another amendment, but I want to ask for a determination on that one first. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Just a little bit of clarity from what I heard at that meeting. And with regard to the culvert as well, specifically that, I thought I was very much joyed to understand that the culvert is going to be looked at again, and this time with a little bit more of a fine eye to it. The director of DPS was right on top of it, articulated it very well. I met with him previously to that meeting. We had a great conversation. I'm in favor of the, doing it initially, the part that we're gonna get, and having him go back and look at it in another way. Perhaps cost savings and perhaps certainly a better way of doing it. And the fact that we are now phasing the park, it's not so important that the culvert all the way through the park be done. That was explained as well. You don't have to go back very far. All you have to do is go back to last night, or the night before, I believe it was, whichever night that we had that downpour. And I will tell you that the culvert is in need. And my store flooded, just FYI, and I'm not even on that, I'm around the corner. So I'm very much in favor of the promise that we got from the DPS director that the culvert will be looked at. I believe that I asked that question, I believe it was acknowledged. And yeah, you know, it's really interesting. I go back to 31 years ago when I moved to this town, this city, sorry. And we were discussing the waterfront park then, and we still are. So it's time to move on, and we will take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. I was not able to attend the ad hoc, so as a result, I feel like we started some of this conversation during the budget conversation when we talked about the CIP. And to me, that prompted a lot of, to me, what sounded like, you know, trying to come up with sources for funding these projects and almost prioritizing which one we found to be more important. And that really kind of bothered me a little bit, but I did want to attend the meeting on Thursday night, but I was not able to make it. So I did reach out to the planning director and talk to others who were there, who were presenting, and got, you know, some feedback. I already knew.
Can you speak to the amendment at hand?
Yeah, sorry, the amendment on striking the culvert. So here's what appeals to me to keep that as it is. The fact that the configuration and trying to rethink the design and trying to scale back makes sense. And that's part of what happens as you start moving along with projects and you get more information and more insight. So in talking to the planning director, who I will defer to, because if one of the things that I find appealing that we can talk through this and make these amendments or talk about what will get us to support it, is that we have everyone available here. And might as well ask the planning director to speak to that and speak to that aspect of it. But if we were to hear and listen from that, we understand why there's the reasons for what's being asked.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Z and Councilor Donovan.
Thank you. Just two things. First of all, if the at-large councilor stands to benefit directly from the project, perhaps a recusal should be considered. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that I want to explain what the net impact would be of this amendment. This amendment here, as proposed, is to take money away from the culvert and put it into the park. Please read, maybe it's because it was a late class, folks haven't had enough time to read it. Number 3 states we're going to take away the money and just sort of blend it into the whole project. If this amendment passes, the money will actually stay where it was originally motioned to about 6 months ago, entirely to the culvert. So some at-large councilors have argued essentially that they're defending the culvert, they've misunderstood the amendment. If this amendment passes, the money stays with the culvert. If this amendment passes, then the money will be stripped away from the culvert, at least in some unknown portion, because the way the language is written, it effectively gives no control over what the money exactly will be spent for and can be used 100% for the park, leaving nothing for the culvert.
Thank you, President. I'm going to stand in opposition to this amendment. But I can at the very least promise that as the ward counselor for that particular culvert, I have no intention of letting that die. I have no intention of letting that never come to fruition. However, I have a tremendous amount of faith in our administration's leadership in those roles. John Eric White, our engineer, has made it very clear that we cannot do that project right now, that it does need work, it does need redesign. Our DPS director also echoed that. So I'm very much trusting what they have said, understanding that we're not going to let the culvert project wither away to nothing and never happen. I, for one, stand very strongly that it does eventually need to come to fruition. However, this money right now is just a placeholder. And it is going to be much better spent in finishing the park that's already invested in, and we do not want to lose the grant money. At the end of the day, it's just a slap in the face to lose the grant money, because we don't want to spend the culvert money that we can't spend anyway. So logically, why wouldn't we just make that switch? And in contrast, any other options such as just, cycling out of the Mount project, which is just something that I couldn't even begin to understand. So I'm not gonna stand any kind of support of this amendment, and as the ward counselor, I hope that my fellow counselors will also stand in opposition to this amendment. Thank you.
So Councilor Lane raises his hand, I'll come back around to yes. Okay, yeah, the next one. Councilor Lane?
So, how the new report showed me, that's the way I see this. You're telling me that you want to finish a park, but you want to have 40% of a culvert that keeps it from flooding. So if the park floods, nobody uses it. You spend money for what? So shake your head all you want, it's true. It's like having half a toilet, basically, is what you're looking at. So if you don't complete and use the money that it was initially proposed for, which is the culvert, which has to do with safety and usability of this park, what good is the park? It's like, we consistently are the victims of buy two, get one free, but we only needed one. So we end up spending this money on an exorbitant amount of money to finish these projects that probably would have been finished a long time ago, had we used the money the right way. I see this again as nothing more than shifting money around to put in place or whatever agenda there is for the 4 acres of lawn. Every single one of those mayors was fiscally responsible. That's the difference. And I've been here for 45 years, so I've seen the waterfront park. I've seen what it was then and what it is now. And a lot of people around town say, leave it alone. Stop spending money, leaking money into something that now costs 15 times what it cost back then when it first started. So with that, I'm in full support of this amendment. Use the money to fix the culvert and what it's for. For once, use money what it's made for.
Aaron?
Yeah, thank you, President. Yeah, so to the amendment, yeah, I'll be voting no on the amendment. Again, as John Eric White, the city's engineer, said, and I think this is a direct quote, although I haven't listened to it again. He said that the 40%, 60% idea, again, the way this is configured now, and I know it's not appropriating new money in, because we've already made that allocation from free cash. But he said 40% and 60% is a great way to do this. He also said that 60%, that end, which would be from the base of Water Street Market Square, and I think Remax on the river is kind of around the area where the culvert starts. That portion would go into the park. There could be some tweaks that are made to that may be more cost effective. It might not go as it does now between two buildings. The 40% that we would get out of what is being proposed here would make a significant difference. That's the part that all the berm and all of that landscaping would happen. So to get that out of the way now, and the other 60% could be done in phase 2. And again, he thought that there could be some other ideas that could either save money or make the whole culvert more efficient. So I think, we do get some progress on the culvert here by moving forward with this. So thank you.
Councilor Connor, next, big Councilor, sorry.
Well, Councilor Wright hasn't spoken.
So this is, so I'll be speaking in favor of the motion. And my reasoning is this: we're taking 100% of the culvert money and getting 60% of the culvert. Where is the 40% of the culvert money that we appropriated and voted on in this chamber? Where is that money coming from? When I voted in favor of the waterfront park, my concern that I expressed was that you were value engineering this park to the point where there was going to be no value. And I think at this point, we're getting very close to the point where there's no value in doing what we're doing for the amount of money that it's going to cost us. At the end of the day, we'll have a very expensive lawn, we'll have half a culvert, And where's the money gonna come for the rest of the culvert? That we've already appropriated to fix?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. So just to speak again to this, I will be voting no on striking this. And I just want to point out one thing, you know, this came into our packet on June 12th, so it's not new to many of us. I think that was stated that maybe we didn't see this because it's a late file. It's not a late file, it came into our packet. And again, many of us who've done the research on this. We've been following this project for a long time. We were here when we approved the culvert design. And we reached out to talk to the Director Port as well as others involved, John Aaron, to get an understanding. So at some point, we are listening to people who are actually working and managing this project day to day. At this point, I do want to see if we could recognize Director Port to speak as well, because I want others to understand that this is just not us blindly approving something. We can only say so much, but it's been alluded that we really don't know what's going on here, and I really take offense to that. I've been sitting through some of the same history with this park, and I would love to hear from Director Port on the culvert. And I think the other councilor at large had a question about possible funding in the future, so if you could address those items. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, well, and thank you, appreciate it, Councilor. Well, recognizing that I can't speak directly for the administration, any future budget and what brought forward for that next phase for the culvert. I can reassure you that John Eric and I have spoken, that he needs to pursue, and it's been pointed out, he's a professional, and I also share a lot of respect for him. He plans on circling back on the remaining portion of the culvert. I plan on circling back to the remaining portion of Prairie North Way. That needs to be built on top of it. So, while I appreciate all the arguments that have been made here, you know, this evening, and then the considerations that you all have in controlling the purse strings of the city, I do think this is the most responsible action for the city council now, based on the funding sources that we have available under this time frame, and recognizing, as we point out, that it does actually not make sense to complete the remaining portion of the culvert this time, because the Department of Public Services does need to take another look at the design aspect of that. And I think that's an important consideration. I'm not convinced, based on the bids and based on the contractors that we've had come before us, that we have enough monies right now to do the remaining portion of the culvert if we were to do the whole thing anyway. So the point here being, I guess, is it seems to make sense that we move forward with the portions of these two projects that we're trying to combine together, the portion that we can do at this time, in the way that's most efficient with taxpayer dollars. I don't believe that there's a fiscal problem that's created by the maintenance funds for the park. The maintenance funds are specifically for the maintenance of the new park once it's expanded. So I think it's first important that we build that new park. We can debate what the final cost is for maintenance every year, but I'm doubtful that there's any problem based on the amount of revenues that are coming in waterfront revenues, and combined with what we're already working with the waterfront trust to maintain the park space going forward. So I'm not convinced that that account is harmed in any way by allocating some more funds towards the initial construction, so it could be used for maintenance long term. On the culvert end, like I said, that project, it makes sense for us to look at the design aspect of that project before going out and doing it. So I'm not convinced that that project is harmed here. We also pointed out, and we're happy to take it on this as a condition if need be, but we plan to address the change order items that we talked about during our presentation with Sasaki, and to revisit even finer grain details from there, and to make up any additional revenues we can by essentially smaller scale value engineering through the construction phase of the project, so that we do not delay and lose the state funds, but we can still make up some of those additional funds, which would then be there in the account and be reallocated towards the culvert project to reduce any amount that we may have needed at this time to have the larger project proceed.
Calling in the council's name.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. Part of this is, I think in many ways we cloud our own issues sometimes, right? So I'm in favor of the project. What I have questions about are how we get there, and specifically how we fund it along the way. And I think we have made great progress on Thursday night in that regards. And I have to say that listening to the administration and having discussions with experts at our Thursday meeting, they were oftentimes at odds. So, when we originally came into this, we heard that our experts told us that we needed a culvert. It was a no-brainer thing to do. And then other experts came in and told us that we shouldn't be digging between two buildings. So our experts changed their mind and told us that we only needed 40%
of what we absolutely needed the first time. And so, more discussions happened Thursday, where it said that the 40% of the culvert isn't gonna solve downtown flooding. It's not gonna affect it at all. As a matter of fact, we have to consult more experts to reconfigure all of State Street's water flow to be able to possibly impact the flooding that happens. And it was stated by the city engineer that in deluges like tonight, it's not gonna work. It's just, it's a physics problem, right? You can't get that much water into a culvert regardless of the size. The culvert at 40% is probably worthwhile. But in page 2 of the administration building memo, they say that we need more funding for the culvert. So it's a matter of how we're going to approach funding mechanisms of the culvert, right? The amendment that's here says that we should allocate money for that along the way, as opposed to just pay now and guess later where we are. And when we guess later, what happens is that we put at risk the verbal commitments that the planning director makes to the citizens, to the DPS director who says we want to look at those things again and find out what's right. We're in many ways, pressuring our experts to get to the answer that we want to get to. Part of my frustration, and again, I'm in favor of the project, is that when we rush at these deadlines for deals, we don't always get the truth. So it was stated that we had to sign a contract by June 30th. Well, maybe it's sometime in July. We had to make a commitment to the grants by June 30th. Well, that's sometime in July. We do need to complete work by year end, not 12/31, but June 24th, as it actually says on the grant. So there's not always a straight line comment that goes along here, especially when we rush at the end of the judgment. The reason that we're in this rush is that on Friday, June 30th, free cash is frozen until November. So if we don't make a decision on free cash, then that option is off the table. That's why we're here tonight. That's why we're pitting ourselves against each other, because we're faced a self-imposed deadline that we didn't think through. And so now the citizens get the short shaft. Our experts have their arms bent to give the answer that we need to get an answer for Friday. And so I don't like it. I don't like the way we fund it. And to the comment that was made, that my proposal that I had talked about on Thursday, and we talked about it as an idea to try to flush out, was to try to deprioritize other projects, is completely false. Because I stated that. I stated that based upon the realistic timing that would happen, no project would be delayed. And as a matter of fact, the city would have more flexibility if they didn't opt to get rid of their free cash. And part of that, and one final comment on the free cash, we have a financial expert amongst us who tells us through practice that anything above $50,000 we should bond. And yet here we are going against our own process and our own best practice to say, no, we want to spend $650,000 of free cash, and we want to spend $274 out of the parking fund. We want to spend $850,000 of real money as opposed to bonded to be able to complete this vision and this project. So that's why I think that we've clouded the whole conversation a little bit as to how we want to move this thing forward. And, the only way we have it right now is we have an amendment on the floor to keep the culvert money assigned to the culvert. Thank you.
Councilor Z.
Thank you, President. I just want to, staying on the motion, address a couple of pieces of information, I think that are misinformation or disinformation or incorrect. The first one is, the funding is not a placeholder. This isn't like a planning exercise like VIP. This is an actual funding request. This is actual free cash dollars. So the money is real in this case. The second one is on the grants. I've been around long enough to have heard that argument maybe more than a couple of times, and we do have a couple of grants before us, and I just want to address the risk at hand of per se losing them. We did ask in committee last week, although it would have been nice to explore a little bit further, what's the sort of match is typically how grants are done, and what does the city need to put in order to get the grant? And the general answer was, at least on the park grant, a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning if they give us 400, we have to put in 400. We are bonding $3 million of CPA money to leverage 800. I'm not saying it's the worst deal I've ever seen, but it's also not something where I think keeping money that wasn't even intended for this project, taking it out, which is what this amendment does, and leaves it for the culvert, would have any effect on a grant that had nothing to do with this money in the first place. So it's unclear how that argument makes any sense. The last piece I wanted to address is just, I guess we all heard the city engineer a little bit differently last Thursday. I heard a bit of a different story. I heard that, drainage in the downtown is actually a much larger, much broader problem. And this was supposed to be a part of that. And so with a project of that size, the more you take away from it, the further you get away from its completion. And so, again, I just can't help but point out how vital the culvert was previously argued to be in the last iteration, and now it's okay. It'll be okay. We can do 40% of it. Somehow it is going to make a difference in the flooding downtown. I'm really asking for your support on this amendment. I want to be very clear with the residents that this specific amendment has no difference on the park. The park still has all the money it was originally allocated. What you're doing here, if you pass this, is if you pass it without accepting this amendment, you're robbing one to pay the other, and the one is the culvert and the other is the park, and that is not right. Thank you.
Good stuff. I'll need a minute. Roll call on the amendment.
Roll call on the motion amendment, strike number 3, reallocation culvert funding. Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
No.
Councilor Donahue.
No.
Councilor Lane. I'm sorry, Councilor Khan.
No.
Councilor Lane. Yes. Yes. Councilor McCall.
Yes.
Councilor Preston.
No.
Councilor Vogel.
So,
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
No.
Motion fails.
Councilor Z.
Motion to strike and amend to strike number 4, please. Second. So try not to rehash the same conversation, but just to follow up, this is actually a little bit different in the sense that here what you're actually doing is taking money that really should be allocated for the maintenance of the park in the future and trying to steal it in order to finish the park today. And by finish the park, I mean do barely a shell of what was originally discussed to be, and doesn't even include the waste to the water, which was actually the genesis of the entire waterfront in the city of Newburyport, going all the way back to when the original lawsuit occurred. This number 4 proposes to take $300,000 and suck it into the project. A lot of fighting was done about those funds specifically when the NRA was proposed and ultimately was dissolved. And that money was set aside for the waterfront park. But one thing I've constantly been harping on, and folks will remember my arguments during the stripping of the Herman Roy Trust Fund, was trying to leave some money that we could live off of the interest essentially for care of the park. And here we're coming in and taking that 300. I will happily argue with the planning director if he wishes, but I am the chair of budget and finance and do have a little something of knowledge as far as the budget goes. And actually consider that to be my bailiwick. So this money should not be taken from that fund for this purpose. The project should conform to the budget that was prepared. That's at least the least that one can expect at this point. And that's even acknowledging how much just has been stripped away. I'm asking for the council to reject number 4. And basically send a message that we need to be able to care for this park when it's done. It's clear that the Waterfront Trust cares about it. It's actually what the ad hoc was supposed to be discussing instead of getting sidetracked into this. So if I need to stand up again, I'll yield to the moment. Thank you.
Councilor Khan.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I will not support striking this, and I do think, and we actually have the finance director, not to put you on the spot, but Can you give the context, the waterfront parking fund, can you give the context behind it, why it was formed? It was mentioned, it was meant for the park, the waterfront park, so this is a method to try to keep the funds and get them going. It even says here, anything that's not used will return there, and so I do think there's an intent here to make sense, so I'm putting on the spot, but I was hoping you could speak to that.
Sure, so briefly on the waterfront park. Waterfront parking fund, of course, this was the fund that was established when the NRA was dissolved. Back in 2020, I believe it was. At the time, the city took in approximately $500,000 in revenue from the Newburyport Redevelopment Authority. Since that time, there have been appropriations out of the fund. Money has been coming in from the parking spaces down on the waterfront. As of today, there is a balance of $505,000, of which $294,000 is recommended for further appropriation to this project in the order before you, which would leave a balance of approximately $211,000. Since the fund has been created, the city has collected annual revenue around $215,000 per year. But yes, in the acts of 2020 or 2019, whatever it was, it did stipulate that the city would create this receipts reserve or appropriation fund. And it went into detail in terms of what it could be used for in summary, to keep up the park. And without having the exact language before you, one could interpret it to include construction, maintenance, anything related.
And what was it last used on, just to give an example that you draw this?
Sure, so $587,000 was spent on design services for the park. And then $40,000 was appropriated for the temporary power aspect of the project.
Thank you.
Sure.
If I may, through the chair. Sorry, just because I think it's important context, just to supplement what the finance director offered, I was involved with a fair amount of the special act, whole petition, going back. That special act makes it very clear that it can be used for both construction and maintenance of the park long term. And it is very important, I think, here to recognize that the current debate on the floor amendment, which I appreciate, is intended to save money for the maintenance of the park. We can't get to the park that's to be maintained unless it's constructed in the first place. So the special act itself does allow explicitly in there the construction of these homes to be used for that purpose.
Thank you, report.
Can I just ask the finance director a couple of questions, please? What's that? Yes, we're gonna be here for a while, so always and sure. So. Could you answer these questions for me? So this revenue comes from the parking spaces down there, right? Or does that include the garage?
Just the revenue from the dirt lots.
So the lots we want to get rid of that makes money that we're gonna get rid of. We want to spend this money on that, right?
A portion.
Okay, so how much does the lawn make in revenue that's gonna add to this fund that we can keep this park, upkeep this park?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard for me to project. Presumably, there might be some rental fees that the city could realize from the park space, economic development in the downtown, harder to quantify.
So like the shanties that we have for free, that we let stay there, where we do $100 each. So how, in your opinion, will we recoup these funds? Will we get rid of the parking? And all we have is lawn to upkeep the park?
Sure, I think, one thing that I promised to the at-large counselor is to update the paid parking pro forma as of the end of this year. Kind of looking at holistically the parking system with the parking clerk to kind of, revisit how much we're taking in the various lots throughout the city. But even in the proposed plan, it's by no means eliminating all the parking from the water. There's still a substantial amount of parking there. And then bringing in, the parking consultant, which has been talked about, there's even more opportunity to really maximize the amount of revenue that's coming in from what will be a smaller number of spaces down there eventually.
There's the parking place. But we're looking to get rid of all the parking on there, the dirt lots, right?
You mean, no, there'll be some remaining, there'll be a drastic number reduced, but there'll always be some remaining.
Right here, that's what it.
Yeah.
Right. But the overall, the long-term plan, I believe, was to remove all the parking from the side, right?
No, it would be substantially reduced, but there would still be some there. Depending on which phase ends up being the last phase, it goes all the way through, or ends with phase 2. And I think you actually have a pretty good count, don't you?
Yeah, sure, and it is, as Captain Kyle pointed out, it's reflected on the sheet here, just keep in mind though, that during the interim time period, some of that gravel area, particularly on the C slot over here, if the council approves, we're able to construct this portion of the park here. There will actually be a little bit more space and we could work with public services, but we've massaged our alignment out there periodically. There'll be more spaces available there in this interim time period, to generate revenues, if you will. Again, to the point that was made here, yes, there will be less spaces here, but that's primarily along the water's edge here. We had already taken out these so-called interim lawn spaces here and here, so there's actually a smaller reduction in spaces that's happening. There will be less spaces at the end of the day. But again, I think the point being, there's maybe too much anxiety, I think, about the idea that we don't have enough revenues coming in, even with the reduction in spaces to maintain the park. We are in an exercise right now, talking with the Parks Department, the Parks Division, the Waterfront Trust members, and looking at what it actually costs to maintain the park with our design team in Sasaki, and recognizing, I think, that it is not a $250,000 a year number. That being the case, the reduction in spaces do not have that impact on our ability to maintain this park going forward. I understand the concern, but I think we'll find as we look at those numbers and the scope of work involved, that it is not of that order of magnitude, and is therefore, even with the reduction of spaces, sufficient revenues coming in to maintain this park.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Just to put a number on it, we're at 245 right now for spaces, and it would go down to 164, which is significant, but that's a significant amount of parking. Still, when this is all said and done.
Thank you. As promised, I'm happy to debate any matters. So I think the first thing is that it's again, string of credibility to say that there's no concern over caring for the park, but also we haven't modeled it and we're not sure. Those are not the same thing. In fact, those are opposing comments. So I just, please, I mean, it'd be nice to have a modest, reasonable debate about what the story is. And in fact, we formed an ad hoc specifically to discuss that for over a period of 6 months. So I'm okay with the we're not sure yet answer. I'm not okay with the we're not sure, but also we're sure that it's not 250,000. That is not fair. It's not sensible debate. The second aspect I want to mention is that a big part of the debate on the care of the park is the standard to which it will be maintained. We are basing certain things based on the standard the current waterfront park is being maintained to, which I think everybody would acknowledge is a pretty high standard. In fact, probably higher than any other park in the city. And that has been the subject of debate and sometimes contention when we talk about the 27 on some other parks throughout the city and the care they do or don't receive throughout the years. So there's a lot to be discussed there. I personally believe that talking about resident expectations, not just for the millions of dollars that are anticipated to be spent here, but also the ongoing, that there is an expectation that what is being maintained in the middle of that area right now would extend all the way to the outside. And the Waterfront Trust has stated that as well. So I also know a lot about the parking ratios too, and yes, while the parking will never be fully gone, that was a goal, of course, of the overall thing, but there is a balance point where there's parking needs, not just to support the park itself, but also our downtown and the revenues, and that's something that we haven't really quite, I wouldn't say finished the conversation, but I don't think we've actually reached any consensus on that. Because nobody wants to kind of admit the tension between those two ends of the spectrum there. Thank you.
Council question.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask Director Port if he could let us know, so if we were strike 4, what would the impact be to the overall project?
That would be a problem for us because we would not have, if you were in the cover piece, you may be able to sign a contract, we would not have any contingency. The main issue that I would be concerned about there is that we immediately run into something and we are not able to deal with it quickly. Well, you may think from the council's perspective, and it's understandable, you have a tighter control of the purse strings. and forcing a discussion back here on the floor, that process alone takes a while. And that can bring up the bill for the city at a cost for the contractor, because we are delaying decisions about what can or cannot be done out there. So again, this is not atypical to have a 5% contingency. We would typically want to hold someone between 5 and 10. This is not atypical to carry these funds for a project like this. So I would not recommend not including that PCR as part of this. I have every intention of returning with the items that we talked about during the presentation last week, and anything else that we can find as we work through the documents for the design team to shave costs a little further, essentially smaller scale value engineering reductions. But I would not recommend reducing that amount in there, because that is the typical 5% that we hold when we go out for construction responsibly. I would also like you to make it clear, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to note two things. Number one is, this just shows you how, how it's not atypical to carry a contingency, but this just shows you how far the project has come off from where it started. The original package included a contingency. So that's all been soaked up. By the way, we need 655 from the culvert. By the way, we need 300. And by the way, we've reduced the scope of the project all the way. That's the totality of the reduction of scope, the totality of the increase in cost, depending on how you want to look at it or talk. So I just wanted to note that taking everything into context, not one little piece at a time, not 294, 655, what we're really talking about. The other thing I want to say is that and I am very, very tired of being the speed bump. The city council moves with due time and due respect for our process. I just want to note right here on this sheet, it says here the Mass Trail Grant was awarded officially on 6/14/23. This was presented to us on 6/12, so it came into our packet before we were even officially approved to get the grant. And here we are today, it's 6/26. So literally within 12 days, we're debating this on the floor, and apparently it's still not fast enough. Pull a project together, have a contingency, have a budget, meet the budget, and then the city council won't be your problem. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, let's do it on the amendment.
This is a motion to strike number 4, appropriation of 5%. Roll call.
Yes.
On motion to strike 4, Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
No.
Councilor Dunning.
No,
Councilor Khan.
No.
Councilor Lane.
Yeah.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor President.
No.
Councilor Vogel.
No.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
No.
Motion fails.
Sorry.
Who are they? Thank you, Council President. I didn't get that. I'd like to make an amendment. I'll try to make my amendment as simple as I can. I'd like to take number 3 and number 4 and rewrite it this way. I'd like to have a reallocation of the CPA allotment for the Bartlett Mall for 1.850, 1,850,000 and 139. Reason I say that is, I want to see the project move forward. I want to see the city have the maximum flexibility. What we just heard, especially with some Q&A with the planning director, is we want flexibility in case there's a 5% contingency. Well, if we go the free cash route and we go on the other route, we don't have that flexibility going forward, right? And so I could have just said for $850,000 and we could have matched it along the way. But I said the million because I am convinced, and this is part of our discussion, that if we leave the money in the Herman Roy Trust, with this and the parking fund, we will have a self-sustaining park. And we will have A+ quality going forward. And we've talked about that. We haven't made our recommendation to the full council yet, but that's what we talked about. Now, in terms of the Bartlett Mall, again, I am in favor as we stand right now. But I have to tell you, I had to read the paper today to find out about the hibernating turtles and the timeline that we're racing against going forward. Now, that's news to me and many on the city council. We've got, it looks like we're in the race to get a bid, a race to get approvals, and a race to get construction started. But where this actually is,
And why I suggested this is we can just reallocate the money ourselves if we wanted to, because we approved it. It would be better if we went through the motion of working with the CPA team, so they understand what we're trying to do here, and we are supportive of the Bartlett Mall. But when I look at the Bartlett Mall itself as a project, we've only funded $220,000, and that was for a design. The 2.6 has a lot of contingencies. One of those is they have to come back to us for approval. So unless it comes in on the 14th, it's not coming out at the earliest because of our meeting schedule over the summer until September. Well, again, what I read in the paper is we should be starting in September along the way. And who here doesn't secretly think that the 2.6 won't be $4 million and we'll have to go through we'll have to start the CPA project all over again because the bonding won't be enough that they have approved to move forward. I'm not trying to deprioritize the project. I'm trying to be realistic in what we're trying to do. So my ask is to take 1.8 million out of the 2.6 so that we can move this project forward with the 40% culvert, with half of the ways to the water, with all of those things, the phase 1A that we're on right now. And to move the Bartlett Mall to when it's ready, and it could be ready in September. Great, we'll get the CPA folks ginned up again, and they can make that recommendation, and we can get that. We're probably not, the point I'm trying to make is, we're probably not gonna beat the turtles, right? And that's not our fault, right? Because there's a project that's coming in that again is gonna be rushed, right? And so, and again, when we go out and our pricing experts have been wrong for 2 years, right? So I'm trying to be realistic and I'm trying to be supportive at the same time. But, and so I don't like the characterization that I'm deprioritizing one project over the other, because that's not what I've said and it's not what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Councilor Khan.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I feel like I'm bringing and calling other people to speak, but I think we need to hear, for example, especially when it comes to Bartlett now, and I hope I didn't mean to say that. I think what I meant is it felt like we were pitting this project against this project, and so I did not mean to say that the council that just spoke that they don't believe in both projects. So I feel bad if that was not my intention. But I think, and I actually really appreciate this conversation and the perspective of trying to get somewhere, recognizing that there are some big ticket items. I mean, and these are projects that, yeah, costs have gone up. And I think that's a very good point. You know, when is this project going to come at, even with the Bartlett now? But I was wondering if I could speak with, and I could ask the special projects manager, in terms of the Bartlett now trajectory and timing. I'd be really curious to know, I know you're gonna give us an update, but in terms of what we're being asked to consider, which, you know, we wrote down these numbers and try to see, does it make sense? Can you please speak to how it would impact the timeline and how far we kind of come? And what that would do to the Bartlett Town project if we proceeded to take out some of the allocation now? If I said that correctly.
So very simply, we can't go out to bid if we don't have approval on the bond. So we are intending to come to the next meeting before we break for recess. We were hoping to have approvals from historic planning and conservation a month ago, and that hasn't happened, but we're confident that's going to happen in the next week or two. So again, if we're unable to go out to bid, regardless, the headline of that newspaper article is a bit deceiving. If you read the article, you could see that it wasn't in no way intending to say that the project wasn't going to happen this year. I think that was pretty clear in the quotes that were in the paper. Yeah, the headline was unfortunate. If we are delayed in not being able to go out to bid until the spring, then this cost will absolutely escalate. If we are able to lock in with a contractor during this season, then I believe everything I've understood from getting additional gut checks from engineers in the last several weeks, that will still be within the scope, will be within the budget of the project. Thank you.
And just to find, that's been my experience too. A lot of things that we've like experienced with costs going up, we're not acting soon enough, and we're kind of kicking around something that we've already talked about and at least voted, not everyone approved. And I think that's an important thing. We're not going to be unanimous on these projects. You know, I'm sorry, I wish we could be, but we're not going to. At some point, there's going to be people that we cannot move to accept these. But I do want to say that we want to get as close as we can. I always want to see the compromise and see where we could get everyone comfortable, because we are representing residents, and there's the viewpoints and the debate is very much appreciated and understood. But with that said, you know, this is why I'm not going to support the proposed amendment. You know, I appreciate where it's coming from, and I appreciate the intention of what's trying to be done. However, I do truly believe that this will go up then for the Bartlett Mile, and for them to have this to be bonding with, which we talked about, and we will be hearing an update on. I don't want to see that opportunity missed as well, so I will not be supporting that amendment. Thank you.
Councilor Vogel, and then Councilor Duncan.
Thank you, Council President. I think that my concern, I'm going to rise and object to the amendment. Not so much in terms of its effort, and I understand the outreach and the potential solution. My concern is to be dabbling in another project for this project. That project has its own course, has its own speed, has its own concerns, has its own funding, has its own direction. And I think to look at that and go, oh, wait, let's move these two projects together by doing this and that. I think that really causes us more difficulty than it provides solutions. So for that reason alone, I stand in objection. I think we need to focus on one at a time, and to pull this together makes it trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, President. I first would just say that the at-large council to my right is much more gracious, but I don't appreciate it. I actually, as ward councilor, would appreciate a little more deference. I feel like I have been pretty much just speaking to complete deaf ears, if I'm going to be honest, and I will say it again. Taking away from the Bartlett Mall in this stage is not sensible. And this project is actually moving. And if I'm not mistaken, it could move as, you know, as early as July 10th before our break, if all goes as planned. Why would we jeopardize that now? This project is happening, and it's gonna need to be paid for in a much shorter time. And to my many, many families who've been waiting for the first successful playground in the city to open, that is gonna be the first one shovel ready. And I strongly stand against this amendment for that reason alone. But to hold up that project in any way, shape, or form is not something that I would ever support, nor would I ever ask another ward councilor to support having that bone of contention in their own ward. So I'll yield to that. Thank you.
Council President?
Yeah, so I have particular interest in whether or not we can reallocate this money. I don't even know who really to ask about this, but if this were to move forward, is it possible to truly take this CPA funds into this?
It requires an emergency meeting with the CBC to do the reallocation. Further questions? All right, roll call on the amendment.
So the amendment, as I see, is a motion to reallocate from the Mal project an amount of $1.8 million. Correct. Roll call, Councilor Z,
Yes.
Councilor Cameron,
No.
Councilor Dunning,
No.
Councilor Khan,
No,
Councilor Lane,
Yes.
Councilor McCauley,
Yes.
Councilor Preston,
No.
Councilor Vogel,
No.
Councilor Wright,
Yes.
and Councilor Shan.
No.
Motion failed.
Councilor Z.
Thank you, Madam President. So back on the underlying motion, which is the motion to amend, at this point, with no amendment. So the first thing I wanted to speak on was the concept of compromise. So a city council that with the same 6 votes can't accept a single one out of many ideas to try and make this a little bit more ameliorated, whatever the word is. And apparently the answer is, well, we're just not going to be unanimous on it, so 6 are going to crush everybody else. That's essentially what you're hearing. Okay, we can go down that road, but this is a long haul game, this waterfront. It takes a lot of time and effort, because it's taken a lot of time and effort to get to this point. And I'm really frustrated. Does somebody else have an idea, or is it only a couple of people who can propose amendments to try and make things more acceptable to more councilors? Why does it matter? Well, I guess again, it doesn't have to matter every time, but I think in terms of what residents see, they keep coming to us and saying, why can't you compromise? And some of us have to keep saying, hey, we keep trying to throw ideas out there. How about a little trim here or there? How about $294,000 out of $6 million? No, that's not acceptable. How about keeping money in its original position for a culvert? Nope, that's not acceptable either. How about reshuffling projects and actually looking at things holistically? Oh, no, we can't do that. The council can only look at projects in silos because that's the best we can do. Not acceptable. With respect to the ward councilor deference, I just want to say I have a tremendous amount of respect for all my colleagues who are ward councilors, and I completely understand why a ward councilor wouldn't want to deflect the funds from their ward. But as the Ward 1 councilor who today is fighting to get like 10 lousy feet of sidewalk done in my ward right now, Ward 2 is getting a decent amount between the Mall, the waterfront park, whatever little bit of the culvert we get, the parking, the playground. There's a lot, and some of the other wards need some investment as well. That's been a tension between downtown and other wards. And I don't think I never looked at this as a ward to ward issue, but if we're gonna make it that way, then we want to understand that other wards have needs as well. And I'm struggling to get some things done in my ward and in my ward parks as well, watching them, struggle to be maintained to the standard that we would like. In the end, I'm left with no choice but the same old, which is maybe the whole point of this exercise in the first place, which is to vote no on the underlying motion. I think that residents are being let down here. I think that a lot more has been stripped out of this project than been told. That one thing we didn't talk about at all tonight, in depth at least, was the 2 ways to the water that have been completely left off. I alluded to them earlier, but didn't talk about them at depth. The pictures show you a little bit of, gives you a little bit of a glimpse of how much has been shaved off of this project. But as was stated in the earlier committee meeting, the first time, before it was even rolled down, bring your own chair, because there's not going to be any benches to sit on. I yield. Thank you.
So I would like to make an amendment. Offer an amendment anyway. It was what Director Ford offered up, where any of the remaining funds go back into the culvert fund. So would someone like to put some better words to that than me? But Director Ford, if you have some thoughts on that one, we can certainly add that to as number 5. It's the funding that's, presuming we have funding possibly at the end, if we don't need the 5% contingency, it could go back in.
If I understand correctly, this is for an amendment or something to the substance of number 3 to allocate that fund back. I guess I would suggest something along the lines of the following, that upon completion of construction, any funds, any construction expenditures reduced from the original contract amount via change order shall be returned, with the balance of said funds shall be returned to the culvert fund for the project. In there.
So, if I might, so you're talking about returning funds to the culvert fund.
Correct.
But which funds from 1, 2, 3, and 4, or just 4?
This would be a sentence added after the end of number 3. That provided, however, that any such funds, any funds, any unused funds at the completion of the project shall be returned to this culvert fund, including any funds, any reductions obtained via change order. So this is essentially the method we're going to be using to, beyond anything that's left over here, return to that culvert fund to actually accomplish that and doing it by change.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilman Z.
So just a question, for the benefit of the public and the council. Once you have the funds, can you just explain the change order, process? Because my understanding would be that basically you get to just make the decision unilaterally without consultation of the council or the public. Is that correct?
Well, typically how that's done is we send over a request for a price proposal from the contractor for the reduction, whatever the work might be. So in this case, one instance is changing the pipe, type from ductile iron to HDPE. We would get a price from them, we would make the reduction in the change order, would take the total amount of the contract, we show there's a line for every, tally there. But if it's reduced by $50,000, yes, we would be able to be a change order signed by the mayor. That amount would be reduced from the contract, and the change or substitution in the scope would be made. And you would not need to return to council to do that. Those funds would then be freed up at the end to be returned to the.
So how does the council or public know what we're getting?
Well, so we could report back to the council, or we could post on our project page as part of the updates, change order was approved for X amount. I mean, we can provide a summary to you of these changes. I think it would make more sense to get the summary at the end, but to update you on the changes. So for instance, if it's the change in the pipe material, we can tell you what that dollar amount was, the change order.
One last question, if I may. Could you just briefly summarize between the first bid that went out and came out even higher and the second bid? What are all the options that you created? What are the optional parts of the bid? There are 8 of them, I believe, or so.
Right, the first bid, we had just the phase 1 areas, and we had as alternates the amenities. When we recognized the council had suggested to go up for fundraising, we thought it could not hurt to see if we had any great prices from the contractor, thereby allowing us, and we could have that discussion again. With high prices, obviously, we couldn't include those, but the first round was just the amenities. In the second round, we actually took, to council's point with the ways, not because we don't want to complete the ways, we intend to fully complete those, at every point, but the idea here was to do the primary park space and at least not sacrifice that. Frankly, there's a lot of other considerations, but some of that was actually tied to state funding more so than the perpendicular walkways. So we are able to get the state monies because of the park side water space, not because of the walkways. So the walkways were put as 2 alternates separately, those 2. The ferry walkway, keep in mind, that one was put as an alternate specifically because it was going to be constructed over the culverts. Again, well, we fully use that brick walkway and move the concrete that's there today all the way. That would not be appropriate, I think, for your judgment, but I don't think it makes sense to build that unless we put the culvert in place first. So those were the first 2. The remaining pieces of that second bid again were the site amenities.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Further discussion, Councilor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I just want to rise in support of this because I think we heard the other side, but many of us have been, and we saw it actually in public comment and some of the folks here who've been reaching out diligently and others as well to understand where we are with the projects and getting this to move forward. So I do, while I understand the amendments were made in all good faith, and I know they did not get accepted, but I appreciated the conversation. But I am really happy to see if we could get something forward just for those residents really looking to see this done. Thank you.
Discussion? Roll call the amendment.
Just for the record, President, so this would be a motion to amend by adding the following language, something to this effect. Any remaining funds shall be returned to the culvert project, including any funds generated by any change. Right.
Correct.
From free cash.
Correct, from said allocation, if you want to go to the council to grant it, if you wanted to say, is it's from this
In
particular.
other words, not leftover funds from the bond.
Right.
There were other things. It's the only source of funds you can, or the waterfront park, it's only number 3 effectively, which is the original free cash outlay.
Correct, essentially with the contract, we had a schedule of values, we followed during construction, we would pay down, work for that piece, and then whatever's left over in this specific category, free cash where it originated from, we go back to that account, not the remaining pieces.
Roll call. Oh, I have a quick question on that. Is it going back to free cash or is it going to stay in the project for the call? So that's all, I'm just making sure.
Shall be returned to culvert.
Thank you.
Roll call. Roll call on said motion to amend. Council Z.
Yes.
Council Camp.
Yes.
Council Dunning.
Yes.
Council Khan.
Yes.
Council Lane.
Yes.
Council McCall.
Yes.
Council Preston.
Yeah.
Council Wallace. Council Wright.
Yes.
And Council Shin.
Yes.
Do I get to vote? And Council roll call, I have it down to yes. Thank you.
All right, so back to the other line.
Pass.
So back to the underlying motion.
Back to the underlying motion, which is the motion amendment, a motion approved as an amendment, of that amendment.
Correct.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call on said motion to approve order 470 with that one amendment. Councilor Z. Councilor Cameron.
Yeah.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane. No. Councilor Collins.
No.
Councilor Preston.
Yes.
Councilor Goldberg. Yes. Councilor Wright.
No.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
6-5, motion passed.
Thank you.
6-4. Yes, it's 4-1 absent.
It's not been reviewed by the finance.
Okay, we have a lot coming out of budget and finance. I'll make every effort to do it as quickly as possible. We're gonna start off with transfer 153. As promised during committee, we'll undertake each one separately. I might combine a couple, but only if they're topically related or something like that. The first two that I'd like to take together are a motion to approve the OPEB trust fund in the amount of 100,000 and compensated absences in the amount of 350,000.
Second.
So these are, so first,
Can you give us the,
153. This is transfer 153. These are all parts of 153. Okay, sorry about that. So the OPEB trust, so the first thing is to set the stage. Transfer 153 is our capital raft, as I've come to call it. And historically, it's been a lot of free cash, and there is a good amount of free cash in here, but there actually are other sources as well, enterprise funds, miscellaneous funds, 40R funds. I'll try and illuminate upon those as we go through them. We discussed these during the budget process, just as a quick reminder for the public. I kept a running tally in the minutes. You noticed everyone I updated with whatever was discussed, and the Committee on Budget and Finance voted on each one. The intent tonight is to bring all of them out with the exception of the Atkinson Common. We just could not physically get it done. We will. It's from ARPA, that particular one, so it does not freeze, so we have a little bit of leeway. Okay. So on the first two, OPEB trust fund and compensated absences. First of all, OPEB trust fund is one of these that does have multiple funding sources. It's essentially split between the general fund, the city, and water sewer retained earnings funds. The total amount is 100,000. And OPEB trust fund is our long-term pension liability. We are making an effort to fund that liability to a certain percentage. We did have the finance director speak to this at length. Different cities and towns are all over the place in terms of their percentage of how funded they are. Some sub 5-7%, others, way higher up than that. We are on a schedule to try and get these things funded as we can. This is the recommended transfer for this year. It would not be the first year that we have made this transfer. So it's $100,000 being asked to put into the trust fund. I don't have the exact balance of the fund at hand. If somebody would like to, I'm sure the finance director could provide. We discussed this on June 6th, which now seems like a lifetime ago, and in committee on that one, it was 2-0 in committee. The compensated absences is just what it sounds like. Many folks had in contracts in the past. Sick time and so forth, that would be quote unquote bought back in order to at the end of their employment with the city. So this is a number that's an estimate. It's a little bit funky in terms of timing. If an employee is intending to retire, then you have to give notice by sometime in the early fall, but they are simply indicating possible intent. They're not promising that they will retire. So there is a little bit of art to trying to estimate what the amounts will be. If that employee does retire, then the obligation does exist. It's contractual, it must be paid. If they don't end up retiring, then the money stays in that compensated absence fund. The $350K that's being proposed here does cover a couple of retirements that have occurred, and looking forward, estimates out, I believe it's 4 employees or so that are potentially looking to retire. And if this passes and all of those retirements do occur, the expectation is this $450K would cover all of them. So there would be a subsequent allocation just to cover at least the ones that maybe are contemplated to happen. If another unknown or surprise retirement pops up, you could be back here, but at least for what is known at this point, to the best of our ability, the $350K appears to be sufficient. On the same night, 6/6/23, committees recommended 2-0. That's the first two.
Was there a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Further discussion? Roll call.
Roll call on both OPEB and compensated absences. Councilor Z.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Council Daniel,
Yes.
Council Lane,
Yes.
Council Khan,
Yes.
Council McCauley.
Yes.
Council Preston,
Yes.
Council Vogel.
Yes.
Councilor Wright,
Yes.
Council Shan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next is two matters from IT. One is the data center, which I believe everybody's pretty knowledgeable on. I do want to note right off the bat, the original request was 935.5, about approximately $1 million. It was revised. I don't call it an amendment because it wasn't amended in committee. It was revised. The request was revised by the administration down to 594,378. If you'll recall, there were sort of three options, I guess you could call it. One is a migration to the public cloud outside of the city. The second one was staying in the city, but purchasing the hardware and owning it. And the third one was essentially a lease, is the best way to explain it. It was called Apex by the IT director. In the end, after all the discussion, and there were many, the Apex was sort of the selected option, I guess, because of its cost and value ratio. Would result in having the data centers, as they were called, in the police station and up at the Bresnahan. And so that's the 594. I do want to note that is still proposed to come from ARPA. So that's the first of the two. And then the second one was the IT workstation replacement. It's $25,000. I split between free cash, water, and sewer retained earnings. We've done this in the past, but this is essentially scheduled replacement of, literally people's workstations on their desks. And this is intended to keep on that regular schedule, and that's again 25,000. We discussed the data center at multiple meetings, the IT at 6/15. On 6/15/23, we voted on both in committee, 2-0 with one absent. In favor.
Second on that.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Roll call on that one.
Council Z,
Yes.
Council Kim.
Yes.
Council Daniel.
Yes.
Council Khan.
Yes.
Council Lane, yes. Council McCauley. Yes. Council Preston.
Yes.
Council Vogel.
Yeah.
Council Wright.
Yeah.
Council Shan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next one is planning and development complete streets transportation project, $27,009.31.
Second.
Do I have that right? Yes.
Yeah.
I do, okay, I might break down wrong, sorry, okay, so yes, $27,009, this is split up over a variety of different accounts in terms of two anyways, there was some money left over from the DPS salt bed, which was our former DPS director's favorite thing, $47.99, and then there was some money left over from the Safe Routes to School design project, and this is proposed to be put towards complete streets. Primarily design, I think, in the way to summarize it is every year there's a complete streets funding round with the state, and you basically make a presentation and you vie for funds. The city has received some complete streets funding in the past. Parker and State Street's probably one that's most notable. So the idea behind this was to put some money into design in order to have something prepared to submit for grant. There is no specific project this $27,000 is assigned to. We did ask about an prioritization plan, which was actually an original requirement of complete streets in general, and the planning director did provide that to all of us by email. So while we can't say it's for these three projects specifically, you at least have the list available to you for review, and the public could request that as well. We discussed this on June 1st, and in committee it was 2-1 in favor.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Next.
Okay, next is the parking clerk. Why don't we do the parking clerk, 50,000 and the fire apparatus for drains together?
Second.
So not quite the same department, but hopefully it's okay. So the parking vehicles is $50,000. This is for a hybrid vehicle. This is being targeted to be funded out of the Green Initiatives Fund. So it's $50,000. We talked about this. The parking clerk stated that the existing vehicle is essentially failing, doesn't hold the charge, something with the heat in the winter, and also difficulty for parking officers just literally day-to-day utilize the vehicle, getting in and out of it. We did talk about why hybrid and not full EV, and that was discussed, and this seemed to be, I guess, the best option for the department at the moment. But it is a hybrid, and that is okay in terms of the Green Initiatives funding is what we uncovered in committee. In terms of the fire, number 27, pardon me, FD01, that's a grand total of $45,000 coming from a couple of different funding sources: wire inspection fees, plumbing inspection fees, and senior community center maintenance, 25, 10, and 10 respectively. So in turn, this is at the central fire station, of course, the other one is offline to be reconstructed, but I guess the apparatus screens, which are in the bays, and when the vehicles come in wet or slushy or snowy, this is where everything drains to, are essentially crumbling and failing and need to be replaced. I'm sure we're all aware that the building in general has some other needs, but this one was one that was identified. In terms of the funding sources, you know, none of them are sort of directly related to fire per se, but essentially the discussion was that the funds have gained a little bit of a balance, and this was a way to trim them down on a worthy project. And that's why the wire inspection fees and the plumbing, those are what is paid when those inspections are done on homes and commercials, things when they're built, et cetera. And the senior community center maintenance fund had a little bit of excess in it. So on both of these, there's 3-0 on the fire one on May 18th. And there's 3-0 and 3-0, both on 5/18 for both of these.
Councilor Collins.
Yeah, I just have a question about the funding source from the on fire for the community center maintenance fund, as to why we chose that. And my thought process goes this way. The community fund contains revenue from private sources that are donated to the maintenance fund, specifically entailed for maintenance of the community center. And I'm not sure if we're mixing privately donated funds with work for this that would be allocated elsewhere.
I probably would defer, but I don't believe donations would go into the revolving fund. They go into gift funds because they get accepted under 4453A, but if I'm wrong.
That's correct. So the revenue that would go into the senior community center maintenance revolving fund would strictly be rental income that comes in from the use of the building, including the lease payments from the tenant space at the center. Any gifts or donations that were made to the center would be earmarked in a totally separate fund.
Even those earmarked for building maintenance.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Collins. Further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do the two highway ones together. So motion to approve downtown lighting and some grinder. So downtown lighting is 199,000 and change, so basically 200 coming from 3 different accounts. One's actually called LED street lights, the paid parking fund, and then the pickup truck, which was an orphaned account from a prior purchase. So the downtown lighting, I think we're fairly familiar with. Just really quick refresher, the CPA application originally was for all of downtown. The CPC said we don't want to spend money on lights that are not in parks. So that application was trimmed back just to the lights that were in parks. That was approved by the council a couple of months back, whenever it was. But there was a lot of discussion at that time about when can we do the other lights downtown? And this is your answer to that. These are the other lights downtown. They are intended to be consistent with the lights that were selected and some of the conversation. This is not to add new lights, this is to make the lights that we're in the positions where they are to work accordingly. In terms of the funding sources, the LED street lights, I think, was a leftover account. The pickup truck was left over. The paid parking fund, you know, is the fund that we use to fund the, you know, in the budget, there's an inter-transfer that comes in every year, and that's what funds the parking clerk. But the that fund specifically is stated to be able to be used for downtown improvements and upkeep. Again, I don't remember the exact words, but that was that. So that's the downtown lighting. That was 201 absent on June 8th, 2023. And the other one is the stump grinder. That's $80,000. This is being funded from the 40R district zoning incentive. So the stump grinder right now does not exist. We don't have one in the city, and it's all outsourced. So it's high cost and no control over schedule. That's the primary argument for why they would like to have one. This is a specialized piece of equipment, obviously dangerous, so not everybody at DPS would be trained on it, but they would have some folks who would be able to. The 40R district came at the time when it was created, came with incentives for creating the district. And so that's part of what funded the 40R. There's also bonuses that come once units come online. This is my understanding. So this money already is inside of the city, ostensibly received when it passed, and that the incentive side was based on how many units could go into the zone, and then as units come online. So I believe there is more 40R incentive expected when the next Minco building comes online, and then from there I get a little bit fuzzier, but that was the discussion. The stump grinder was 201 absent on June 8th, 2023.
All those in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Okay.
Sorry, the point of order, I just, I know there's a public comment was under something in general government on the ground school, and I didn't know if the person who made the public comment should know that we're not going to be taking that up today. So I just want to make sure that's understood.
Certainly, that don't see this coming out tonight, so if you don't want to be here.
Double understood.
Yes.
Okay,
That's fine. No.
No, this is fine.
We should stop there.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve DPS Parks and Field rumor 12,300.
Second.
So just as a reminder, I skipped Atkinson. That's purposeful. It's not coming out tonight. It hasn't been finished yet. 12,300 on the infield rumor. It's the infield rumor that keeps on giving because we've talked about this a few times. It actually in FY22, 15K was appropriated. Apparently that was not sufficient funding even potentially at the time to purchase one. And now everybody's favorite thing, prices have gone up, blah, blah, blah. So if they don't have it, they never bought it. The $15,000 still exists. There's $15,000 here. And so that would, give you a total balance close to like 30K. And they do believe that with that money, they could actually buy this thing. And this is also coming from 40R district zoning. We had a very brief conversation about the schools and that, but not to the level that we've had. It was 201 absent, 6823.
Discussion?
Just a quick question. Thank you. Just a quick question. So you said 15, I see 12,3 here.
15,000 was approved in FY22, 12,300 is what we're approving tonight.
Thank you.
Further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Go.
Okay, I'm gonna do this one by itself. DPS water, motion to approve the 50,000 for the chlorine booster. So, first of all, this is just as it states, this is the chlorine booster that lives on the bridge. Actually, it's not in the Olga Way station, but it's on the bridge there, and as the name implies, it boosts the amount of chlorine as the water is making its way out to the items for potable water. The amount is $50,000. We did have a good contingent of the water department with us on the night when we discussed this. To cut right to the chase, the most controversial aspect is definitely the funding source. The funding source proposed is the Plum Island hydrant replacement. We had a lengthy conversation about what was that fund originally for. We certainly know where the money came from. At least we can answer that. That came from the settlement with the company that designed and constructed the project out there. And then we talked about sort of the history of that. We had pulled from our ordinance, the creation of it. It did not help provide, I would say, a tremendous amount of clarity. But the primary arguments on both sides are the Plum Island Hydrant Fund is really for shortcomings of the system. This a shortcoming of the system? On the other hand, Plum Island residents are ratepayers just like everybody else. So they do fund through their rates all of the work. When a lift station is built out on Story Ave, Plum Islanders end up paying part of that cost, and that's just part of being part of a rate paying system like that. So is it really fair to keep dipping into this singular fund just because every time something has the word Plum Island in it? So those are the two, the yin and the yang. I'm giving you both sides of the argument. It was controversial in committee. What I think was clear to some degree was that it's an important project. It's a project that is valuable for the island in terms of the water quality, and also I think something about pipe sizing and fire protection, but they're all starting to run together. So it was deemed to be an important one. I don't believe this is the entire amount of the project. If you recall in the CIP, there was an amendment. I think this is like 350K or something is what the revised was to actually do the project. This is more for design or consideration. I think that's the best I can do on summarizing.
So yes, I was the dissenting vote, and my vote is based on the fact, as the board one councillor alluded to, that funds in our water delivery system should be shared equally amongst all the participants. It's just not fair that that Plum Island pays for lift stations. They pay for new developments on the, the Route 1 traffic circle. They pay for everything that goes into the system on a prorated basis. But whenever there's an opportunity to stick the Plum Island residents with a specific fee, there's no hesitation from the administration in picking that funding source. I think it's also, so that's my, objection. The thing that is misleading in this whole project is that it's designated as an improvement to the chlorine delivery system. It is not. As we learned, this is a fire suppressant issue to add more volume to the hydrants on Plum Island, so that the Plum Island residents do not have to have manual intervention by the fire department at that chlorine booster station to deliver the water pressure required in the hydrants. So the fact that this is it's an emergency, in my opinion. It's something that should have been completely funded and not drawn out over 2 years for design, and then go through a process where the funds have to be allocated to fix this. One of the administration officials, I forget which one, said that there could be up to an hour delay in response time for this issue, which I find unacceptable. I don't know how we could tell anybody on the west end of the city that, oh yeah, there's a fire, we'll be right there. It'll take us an hour to bypass the water pressure at the chlorine station. So I urge the administration to put this forward on a fast track and take the money out of free cash or anywhere else to make sure that this safety issue is resolved as soon as possible.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to add one other thing. This actually is $100,000, or it was, last year, 100K was asked, and the council trimmed it to 50 as a body. I don't remember what the vote was, but the council trimmed it back to 50. That 50 was coming out of the hydrant fund. So I think at the time, the argument was that we'd like to see the other 50 maybe come from free cash as a compromise, but it came back as hydrants again. So I just forgot to mention that.
Further discussion, Councilor and Councilor.
I just had a quick question based on the at-large councilors comments. So your notice, did the notice indicate that it was 3-0 in committee? Is that not, did I miss something there? 2-1. It was 2-1.
Yeah, I apologize. I have to go back. I was actually looking at that and I apologize. There was a lot of notes. So I think I don't remember it being 3-0, but I hesitate to say it. I think it was 2-1. I'm looking at my colleagues from here. It was either 1-2 or 2-1 or something. I think it was 1-2 was my best. I apologize. I will try and revise these when we come back.
I think it was 1-2.
I think it was 1-2. I think that's 1-2. 1 in favor, 2 opposed.
Thank you.
Councilor Wright and myself for the 2.
Thank you.
Councilor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. I do have a question, a couple questions on this. So, we have $50,000 in this fund right now. We're allocating the other 50. Will that get us to 100,000 to begin the project and complete that?
It will get us the design is the best of my understanding, but I believe the entire project in the CIP was about 350 in what it was revised. So no, it does not complete the project. I presume presumptively it gets you plans, is what I understand. I'm sorry to look at you, but nobody else, unless Andrew knows, but that's the best of my knowledge. That's something like you.
Yeah, my understanding was that phase 1 was essentially engineering, some looking at the controllers and reconfiguring them. But yes, there would be a second phase, presumably for the additional 250. Yeah.
Okay, so, thank you. Where I'm going with this is, why, if this is an emergency, why are we only talking design? Did that come up in, I mean, I want to be supportive and try to send a message, but I want the 50,000, right? So even though you know the funding source, that's really what we have to choose from, right? Is the funding source or not? So what the project really needs is an additional 250,000 post-design, to be able to keep making sure all the assumptions that are correct. But that's what the assumptions are with the administration review, is that say?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Donahue.
Council President, I understand the solidarity with the at-large counselor. Plum Island seems to really get the shaft when it comes to all the bills that, like he mentioned, has the word Plum Island attached. So I would really like to see this all come out of cash, and if there's a way to have that be the alternative, that's what I would support. So I'll go with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just operationally, this has been alluded to already, but free cash is available for 96 more hours or something. So I don't know if there's so I'm willing to put this aside for the moment. We have a million other things in budget. We can come back to it at the end, but that is out of our hands at the moment. Motion to table.
Second.
All right.
I was gonna ask, so if we do table this, essentially, this would not come out before the fall when.
First of all, table's not a big motion, but I can table it in this meeting.
Yeah.
I still have the
So
floor.
we'll do it at the end.
Let me, just need to.
Right. That's-
Roll call vote. Roll call, everyone.
Roll call on motion to table, Madam. Councilor Dean,
Yes.
Councilor Cameron,
Yes.
Councilor Donahue,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes,
Councilor Lynn. Yes. Councilor McCall.
Yes.
Councilor Preston,
Yes,
Councilor Vogel. No. Councilor Wright,
Yes.
and Councilor Sheehan.
Yes.
Okay, moving right along, DPS, so I'll do the two DPS ones. Motion to approve DPS water main replacement 250K and DPS sewer clarifier upgrades 590K. Okay, so these are two, one is obviously from water, one is sewer, but it's the retained earnings from each of their respective funds. The water main replacement was actually subject to some conversation during the budget, so they carry some money in their budget for what they also call like water main replacement or repair. And then they also have this longer term goal of actually just proactively going out and replacing water mains. So there's a difference between it breaks in the middle of the night and, can we actually go out and say, do a street before we pay for something else? So this is an effort towards that longer term. They basically carry the money in the budget for the emergencies and try and put this money. From our conversation, I think in all honesty, obviously, if the emergencies happen, they will intermix the funds because they need to resolve a broken water main for obvious reasons. So that's your 250. That's been fairly consistent. I think we've done this transfer or at least funded this a couple of other times, but I do want to say that they were very clear, this is not sufficient. There's a lot of water main need replacement. The clarifier upgrades was also the subject of debate or discussion in the in the budget. Chris, who's the operator at the wastewater treatment facility, showed the map where there are these two clarifiers, the big circles, and then there's a third circle area or third area that can hold the third circle. And the argument is that two clarifiers is not enough redundancy. So because even though you'd say, well, take one down and fix it while you use the other one, without both of them, they run the risk of not having sufficient capacity. So they need three so that they can run two and take one offline, do whatever they need to, then swap and swap and swap until they do all the things that they want or need to do. The 500, it's a much bigger project, as you know. The 590K is another effort towards design. They are taking it out of sewer retained earnings. And we did some projections and numbers around that, and we did the rates, which are also coming out tonight. Both of them were 3-0 on June 13th, 23.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the HVAC boiler, I'm sorry, the HVAC boiler replacement was withdrawn, so not much for us to do there. I don't even think we need to receive and file it. Chair, clerk, I think that, would you recommend that? I mean, it's part of this broader order, so I was gonna just let it go. Withdrawn. All right, so motion, last one, motion to approve 69,370 NHS elevator controls. So I think we've heard a little bit about the elevators. They're not really passing inspection at the moment. We did have a conversation in committee throughout the budget on capital spending in the schools. and when the schools are able to absorb capital into their operating budget from time to time and when they are not. I would say to summarize the conversation, generally, the smaller things are when they're able to pick them up and they purchase like tractors and vans and whatever things come up. The question was brought up, why can't they absorb 70K into, I don't know, $40 million or whatever the total amount is. We also asked what the total expenditure was on education. It's about 60% when you factor in all the benefits and things that sort of come from the general fund across the divide. It is needed in order for the safety and the utilization of the elevator. I don't think that was the nature of the discussion. It was just a matter of funding sources often is 3-0 on committee on May 30th.
Discussion? Councilman McCollum.
Yeah, Council President, I'll just make a comment in ongoing discussions we've had with the school business manager over the last 3 years. They're able to absorb multiple projects and the average of $150,000 or so in capital expenditures. And well, they don't budget for it, they don't allocate for it. They have the flexibility to move things around going forward. We asked for no other capital expenditures along the way. I think this kind of fits into that.
Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so moving out of transfer 153, at least for the moment, the next one is transfer 159, which is a transfer from harbor master. Retained earnings 15,000 to assistant harbor masters, Catherine Park attendants, and Plum Island Park attendants. This is an interdepartmental transfer. Essentially, the long story short is that two things. Wages have gone up, and so a lot of these positions in the transfer 2 side, the 2 side of the ledger are wage driven. So it's basically simple math as that happens. And then the other thing is that there have been some areas of increased use of hours themselves, just more time from people, particularly on harbor patrols. And I guess assistant harbor master is putting in more hours. And then there are no lifeguards on the island, so they were sending out more patrols, and that was driving a little bit more overtime as well. So it is 15,000 again, it's staying inside the department. It was 3-0 in the committee.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Next is transfer 160, which is police transfer from a couple of different ones, 3 of them, 2,500 fuel oil, 2,500 office supplies, and 5,300 ammunition weapons to maintenance of building.
Second.
This is a continued conversation on the blown up generator that happened at the police station, so they were still kind of catching up. We had done a transfer for this purpose. But unfortunately, when they were going through in order to finalize or prepare to finalize the books for the year, they found out they were still a little bit short, but did have some money and some other funds within the department. But because they're in different categories, required a transfer to do it. The total cost of the generator was about $23,000. And it's not an ongoing thing. I mean, the repair is completed. It's not until it goes up next time we're done. So it's 3-0.
Further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Next is 161 appraisal system, 7,000, and salary public health nurse to multiple, and the multiples are all in sort of in the clerk's office.
Second.
So first thing is on the source side, the primary thing was, I think we had heard that there was consideration for moving the vision appraisal system into the cloud. That was decided against. We didn't really get into a tremendous amount of detail, but it's not happening, at least for now. So that left some funds available, in the amount of about $7,000. And then there, the public salary nurse, there was some changes in those departments, if you recall, from the budget and the shift between sustainability. So we basically left some unutilized budget. On the 2 side of the ledger, it's essentially we had a somewhat of a similar situation with some other departments where we had flux in staff, causing some positions to need to be like paid to different people at the same time, just because of how the process was working with the personnel. And so, and then also to accommodate, people coming in at different rates as they were hired in. So essentially it left a deficit. These funds were available to cover that deficit. It is not anticipated to be an ongoing thing as the clerk's office is, I would say to settle down a little bit in terms of the flux and staffing, so it's not anticipated to be like an ongoing annual thing. 3-0.
Thank you, Counselor. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Next is 467, which is a Teamsters contract. This is the parking staff. So you were all provided with a sort of a summary of changes in the packet, but then I followed up. Councilor Connor requested a red line of the entire thing, and what we received, I forwarded that to everybody, so you had it, so you can see what the whole contract is. The main changes are a wage schedule with an increase as would become common, with a little bump that the person's been with the city for a year. Little minor changes to clothing allowance. And then finally, probably the biggest change is the implementation of body cameras. That was, I guess, subject of the requests from the parking officers. And the contract essentially stipulates that they'll use them when there's an anticipation of a confrontation or something of that nature. We did ask the clerk or the finance director, can't remember who, but they're using the same vendor as the police department. They're the same cameras, and there is an ongoing cost as you would expect, but this isn't as many cameras as the police. So I think the police are around $30,000 a year, and I want to say this was $3,000 to $4,000 a year type range. So anyways, we did discuss that in committee, 3-0.
I think, sorry, just a question. I think under holidays, we did ask if they meant to add Juneteenth as a city holiday. I don't know if that's been amended or was that just not included, since I know that's a city holiday.
I don't know.
Yes, that was a scrivener's error in the tentative agreement. It is in the red line version.
Thank you.
Further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Okay, next is order 459, motion to approve. This is, thank you. This is the establishment of an opioid settlement fund. We do need 2/3 to create this fund, and we would ultimately need 2/3 to take money out of this fund. We do have other funds like this. It's chapter 45B. So I think people have heard a little bit about this, but basically there was a major lawsuit with several different companies over opioids, prescription thereof, etc., resulting in a settlement. The settlement is coming through the state, and then the state is sort of distributing out to the municipalities. It's a 17-year payout period. There's a little schedule that Ethan has provided. Year one is the biggest. And then from there, generally it's going down. There's some kind of ups and downs. The main companies you see are Walmart, Teva, Allegra, CVS, etc. So this fund will provide a place for the money as it comes in to be deposited into. And then because it's a settlement fund, it has to be used for specific purposes. And those specific purposes that we, to the extent we have defined them, are shown in the order. It's prevention, harm reduction, community treatment, and recovery in accordance with the term of the statewide settlement agreements, of which they're very long, but I guess some guidance is expected to come out at some point on how you can do that from DLS, the usual stuff that we tend to see. So the last piece is that because of the way I think 45B works, we can only establish this for the next fiscal year. This fund cannot be created until July 1, which happens to be this Saturday. But what will happen, according to the finance director, is that we already did receive funds before that, but we will do this when the fund is created to take it out of free cash, put it into here. So essentially it's a wash at the end, but we cannot backdate this like to the previous fiscal year. We can't make it effective today, even though we're passing it. It always has to start on the start of the next fiscal year. Just so happens that 5 days out. So we did the best we could, but that is the intent, and I don't know if that will require its own transfer at that time. Presumably, we have to move from free cash to this, so we should all expect to see that.
Yeah, so just quickly, we ran into a similar issue when we created the parklet maintenance stabilization fund. We did a transfer once free cash was served, and to replenish the newly created fund. So this would be the exact same thing.
Further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? That's the third.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, okay. All right, I promise we're getting there. Next is the communication 488. That's a motion to receive and file.
Second.
This is our annual audit from Melanson. We did spend a little bit of time talking about this. There were no new findings. There were some prior year findings that went away, so the auditors go through process, et cetera, to try and identify weaknesses. There are a couple of old ones that are still being worked on. The working on is usually done primarily by the treasurer, the finance director, and HR, depending on what the nature of the issue is, or some combination of all of those. The two remaining ones are really time and attendance tracking and quantification. That was interesting because we had asked, okay, can you quantify how much sort of sick time is out there in a dollar? And that's hard to do right now, but presumptively, once this gets done, it will become easier. And then lingering recon reconciliation issues that they continue to work on. The question was asked, how much unreconciled funds are we talking about? We're not talking about millions or even hundreds of thousands. It sounds like they're fairly de minimis amounts, but some of them are going back many years. Think of like checks that were sent but never cashed, things along those lines. So they're definitely working on the time and attendance. The long-term reconciliation is being worked on, but it's kind of like molasses, I think, because of the difficulty of the work. We then asked what we estimate for free cash. It's a little early. So anyways, it was 3-0 to receive the pilot in the end, just as a notification to us.
Thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor of proceeding and filing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, now your favorite part. So motion collectively to approve orders 461, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I will absolutely be happy to go through each one of them. So 460, oh, sorry, there, thank you. 461 is Port Parks Alliance gift acceptance. This is $1,013.65. This is an unrestricted donation, so it is not for any specific park, not for any specific project, but it is for parks. So we did talk about that in committee. It can't be used to pave a road or something like that, but anything parks related to fine, it will go into its kind of fund of unrestricted park gifts, specifically from Port Parks Alliance. That's how the finance department sees it. That's 461. 462 is a gift from Aaron Jake's Hospital, $2,000 to Newburyport Pride events. This was a late contribution to the event. Most of the events happen in the first week of June. It was initially funded out of DEI, as was the subject of some debate on the floor here, and now receiving this contribution. We did talk about in committee a strong desire to have the books cleaned up on this because they were raising money on the website and saying that they were 501c3 and they had sponsorship options, but then it was also being stated as a city event. So it was recommended, at least by the chair, that not go on too long and it just gets resolved one way or the other. It's private or it's public. Can't really do both. So that's 462. And by the way, all of these were 3-0, which is why I'm doing them together. There's a desire to extract anyone on that. We try. Belleville Improvement Society, $4,700. This is a gift, as it states, from the Belleville Improvement Society, and my memory is fading now, but this is for the Upper Atkinson Tennis Court resurfacing project, which we're familiar with. We had a good amount of debate on this recently. This is where the high school plays. So this is aimed to help buttress that project. It is specific to that. The CPC money was approved, and actually this was listed as a funding source in that application. It's not unexpected money, it's expected money. Next one is 464 Friends of NYS gift acceptance, $23,000. This is a gift, as it states, from the Friends. They raised money for the senior celebration 2023, which is the overnight celebration kids get to enjoy. They sort of outlay the cash, I guess, and then hope, look for the gifts to come in. They did $23,000, so that comes in. The next one is 8867 and change. This is an inclusive playground fund. This is 465. So we have talked quite a bit about the Bartlett now and the playground, specifically the inclusive playground. There's a grant from the state. We put $100,000 for free cash in. There's some CPC money, I think. So there's an amalgamation of funds. Some may remember, if you've been on the council, that this all started actually with the group of parents, and this is the group of parents actually that are being referred to here. So they donated this, but the amount wasn't clear for a little while. They were like doing their books or whatever, and now it is clear. So I brought forward an order to make it official. So that will go specifically to this project. Last one is 466, children's healthcare, 12,500. In terms of gifts anyways, and this is an unrestricted donation to NYS for programming and for services. Because it's unrestricted, and there's not too much to say, but it is programming and services. Again, all of these were 3 to 0.
Further discussion? Councilman Collins?
Yeah, I just have a question. Thank you, Council President. I have some questions on 466 and 464. To what accounts are these gifts to NYS going to, and how are the appropriations being managed coming up?
So I will defer to the finance director on the specific accounts, but in terms of the appropriation, the department head would have the jurisdiction or the authority to appropriate consistent with the level of specificity provided by the gift. But if you want to answer it any better than that, or
That's accurate, Counselor, and the other part of your question, how are they accounted for? They are both set up as separate accounts, so the senior celebration donation, its own account, the unrestricted donation, its own account. But yes, the department head is the authorized spender of funds.
I'm gonna put a pin in that, because I don't believe that's what state law tells us. And changes, is that the money once accepted has to be appropriated accordingly, once it's accepted and put into our thing. So I'll follow up with that, but thank you for that. The next one I have is for the Pride gift acceptance on that. What account did that go into, and how are appropriations being handled going forward?
Recommend.
I'm sorry, which donation?
462, the Pride.
Pride? Yes.
2000.
So like the Ward 1 Councilor mentioned, the funds were expended out of the DEI programming line item in the mayor's budget. And the Anna Jake's Hospital reimbursement will come in as a reimbursement against those funds. So the accounting entry, we would set up a fund to accept the $2,000. And the $2,000 that was charged to the DEI line item would be reclassified, so it gets up to 0.
So the mayor's office spent $2,000 on this program, and that now has been reimbursed.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right, all those in favor of approving orders 461 through 466, say aye. Opposed?
Okay, next one is motion to approve order 460 water sewer rates.
Second.
We had a lot of discussion on this as well, in the context of the budget. I thought it was a good way to do it, and to have the budget and the rates at least have some connection between the two. The summary of the rates is really as follows. They funded fairly level budgets, I would say, overall. I mean, there were no monstrous gains or anything like that. In terms of the rates themselves, we're looking at changes from FY 23 to 24, somewhere in the 3% range for your typical residential customer. And then the non-residential, or in other words, commercial customer, had a larger increase. I want to say it's somewhere between 5 and 6. And that was the what the recommendation was of the Water Sewer Commission. The committee also voted to recommend it 3 to 0. The reason or the argument for the larger increase for commercial was that historically, there had always been a pretty common spread between those two rates. And what happened is they sort of drifted closer together, and this set that gap more than where it was historically normally in the past. Other than that, I don't think there's a big story, other than I do think that there's still some reckoning that is expected to happen in the next couple of years, because a lot of these large projects that we've just been talking about design will eventually become something, and maybe bonds or whatever they're going to be, or grants and some combination thereof. And there is still an effort to try and figure out a rate curve that makes sense along the way, depending on how many of these projects end up being desirable to move forward. So it was 3 to 0. I was committed the whole, so we were there. I don't want to talk about it too much.
Further discussion? All those in favor of order 460, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to take the final item for tonight from 153 off the table, please.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of putting it back on the table?
Yeah, off that, yeah, off to.
Say aye.
All right, so as promised, here's 153. I'm not getting a signal that there's a desire to change the funding source. So I think because it is just, we don't want it back to committee, to be blunt, and it is what it is, so we just have to make a call. I just need one last reminder, is the hybrid fund 2/3 or 6 to come out? Is this 2/3, right? It's 2/3, I believe. Yeah. Yes, because it originated from the utility, yes, I believe that. Yes, it's a stabilization fund, so it would be a 2/3, it needs 8, so it needs 8, just one minute.
So, you've heard my opinion. I will hold my nose and vote yes, because the money is needed. But I don't like the funding source. I'm philosophically opposed to the singling out of Plum Island continuing for things that should be paid by all the ratepayers.
Yeah, I mean, it is my word, I feel obligated to speak. I mean, this is the, definition of a rock and an island. Okay, so it's not a good situation in the physicality of the problem right now, because there is the fire safety aspect of this, which is actually a lot of the genesis. But again, it's sort of a common theme, like, well, why can't we just compromise? I mean, 100,000 was asked of last year, 50K was made, Plum Island we took 50K, by the way, nothing happened in the intervening years. So I mean, in terms of the emergency aspect, I think you're hearing tonight, hopefully there is a desire to move this forward faster. And I suspect if we can't do something when the rest of the money comes in, we're gonna have the same argument again. It would be nice to just, 50 grand, yeah, so I too will vote because I'm not gonna leave my wards unprotected, but it would be nice to do it a little bit.
Further discussion? All those in favor, finalizing transfer 153. Say aye.
Okay, so that's it for tonight. Just a couple notes. Transfer 153, the only remaining item is Atkinson Common. I am working to figure out a schedule on that. That is recommended out of ARPA, so it's not freezing on Friday, so I'll let you know. It is committee of the whole still. We received a roadway bond in tonight. That was also committee of the whole, anticipating some discussion on that on Thursday at our regular meeting, committee of the whole, but it is a bond. It needs to sit in committee. And frankly, we've been through a lot in the last couple of months, and this will not even go until 8. I'm hoping that it goes no later than 7 is my goal as the chair. And we'll have one regular meeting in July, and I wish my colleagues this rest during the bond. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lee. Community services.
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to approve communication. I approve communication 489. I know it's a little unusual to approve communication, but it is the acting head of the library. The mayor has made a recommendation to promote Jessica Atherton to the office of head librarian on a temporary basis. Ms. Atherton came before the committee. She talked about what she liked about the library. She's been there 10 years. Mostly the reference library. She's been doing some work with scheduling and policy. Due to the notoriety of the paper, she's had some challenges, but on the brighter side, she's noticed that the staff has been rallying around that and very supportive. Community has been supportive, and summer programming and summer reading for the kids has started. So those are all positives going forward along the way. She thinks the environment will be good, so that while we plan to do a 90-day search on that, she's hopeful that it will be shorter on that. She believes that the work put in, the policies put in cross training each other has enabled them to continue on without missing a beat going forward. Our recommendation is 3-0 to approve recommendation of this communication.
Yes, I like further discussion. I will also say that she has been very good in the library meetings, so glad that we have her there. All those in favor of approving communication 489, say aye.
I'd like to make a motion to receive the file communication 490 This is the bike feasibility state, and locations estimate. They use Marches Hill as a, illustrated example. We have approved this via CPC. And what we needed in order for them to move forward was we needed a list of 5 sites going forward. So those 5 sites, in addition to Marches Hill, which was already done and is in your packet as an illustrative example, would be the Gloria Grunhall Trail, Colby Farm Lane, the open space, Fulton Pit, the Water Department land in Ward 6, and Woodman Park in Ward 5. Thank you.
Council Z?
My other question on this is just, so all of these sites are, how do I ask this, are legally eligible to have this, right? So I mean, aren't some, like, isn't Colby Farm Lane always supposed to be passive, or am I not remembering correctly how that works?
So you're correct. And so the Parks Commission has identified 5 sites that they would like an analysis done. They would do the same analysis that's done here. There are a number of factors that are in there. I would imagine that when Colby Farm goes through this type of analysis, that they will come back that there's restrictions on it as open space, passive open space going forward. I'd also give you an example that Woodman Park, while it might be a good example, there's no possible way for anyone with a bike to actually get there. So it's problematic as well.
Okay, I'm all set, thank you.
Further questions? All right, the motion was to receive and file this.
Yes.
Councilor Collins?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor of receiving and filing 490, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. Motion to approve order 455, the ACO intermunicipal agreement.
Second.
Thanks. So that's okay. So the last couple of years, this is a 2-year, this is a 2-year agreement. It should start on 7/1, it ends on 7/1/23, so it should run through. Both sides have a 6-month out over time going forward. Newburyport is the lead party to this, and what we had originally proposed to you, so there's a late file in here, was a 65-35 split, as some of the calls and some of the workload has shifted a little bit along the way. What you've seen, what you have in your packet as a late file is the fact that West Newbury wasn't able to actually approve this, given the fact that their budget cycle has already closed. So in 2024, they're going to stick to the original 70-30 split, but in 2025, they'll go to the 65-35 split. It's not a lot of money in terms of everything. We want to use the 2 years to study the shifting costs. There were some expectations that Newburyport would have more calls than West Newbury does. It's actually more of a 50-50 kind of mix. And we think over this 2 years, we'll glean enough information on the tracking it, et cetera, to be able to get to something that's a little bit more firm. So the ask is to approve the amended Appendix A, which is 69-31, and then for 25 will be 65-35.
Thank you, Councilor McCauley. Questions, discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving order 455 as amended as a late file, say aye.
I would just probably roll call on INA. Is that right?
We certainly can do it. I was more hung up on the fact that we have the revised late file hanging out there without a motion.
So a motion to insert that amendment into it, and it's that's the one.
Yes. So that we sign the voting on it together. So that would be first and second to actually refer, I think, exhibit A into community services with order 455.
To replace the.
To replace the
revised specifically.
Yeah, to revise exhibit A.
Okay.
All right,
And in order to approve as amended.
You do that, same mega order. And to approve his minutes.
and do a roll call.
Okay, so one, Council Z,
Yes.
Council Cameron,
Yes.
Council Dunning.
Yes.
Council Cummings,
Yes.
Council Lane.
Yes.
Council McCollum.
Yes.
Council Preston.
Yes.
Council Vogel. Yes. Council Wright.
Yes.
Council Sheen.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Motion to approve order 468, the real grader contract.
Second.
Okay, so this is in a nutshell, the same contract we've had for a number of years, and the real difference is price. The pricing on this is in your packet. It's part of appendix A, but basically in 23, we're going from $75.75 per ton as a tipping fee to 2028, and we'll end up at 112.65. It's about a 40% increase over that time. It's roughly 5% a year. And that's it. And you can argue about it. You can do a number of things. We can be mad about it, but the answer is we don't have any options. This is probably the better contract that's out there right now. What we can do, and it's the uncomfortable conversation that we often have when we talk about solid waste, is we roughly do about 5,400 tons of solid waste a year. That's weight. Composting, if we can knock off 1,000 pounds, has real dollar impacts to the city along the way in terms of using the composter. So that's it doesn't matter what kind of question you ask. It still comes down to the fact that there's only one incinerator in our area that will take us. There's another one, but they're full, and we'd have to start over. We've had a great relationship with them over time. We have to pay the rates going forward. This is in addition to the cartage fees from Mellow, our current carrier, which is also under negotiations as well. And you know, these are the fees that are there. I wish it was. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Crowley. We're gonna do further discussion. So roll callers. All right, all those in favor of order 468, say aye.
Aye.
Councilman Crowley?
Thank you, that's it, Councilman.
All right. So general government, we had an interesting meeting that lasted about 10 minutes, which was a report to the board to where we were expecting Stephen Wallace to come in. And we actually heard that Stephen Wallace had already been sworn in before we had our meeting. So we did have the opportunity to talk to Mike Sullivan, who is a member of the board of trust, who did speak on behalf of Mr. Wallace. He had actually done this events where the person who was being appointed wasn't available, and Councilor Eigenman did it for folks. I had done it for folks when it was for ZBA. So in this case, we let Mr. Sullivan speak. He spoke very highly of Mr. Wallace. He's already been attending some of the meetings, so we took that and voted. I voted yes. Councilor Vogel voted present. I did want to give John's an opportunity to maybe explain what happened. They can have more insight than I do at this point.
Yeah, apparently, I was actually on vacation. That doesn't mean it wouldn't happen if I was here. But he was sworn in inadvertently. The mayor came over with Stephen Wallace. Stephen Wallace apparently was not aware, or just didn't think it was important to go to the 5:30. This happened in the afternoon of, and one member of the clerk's office in good faith looked at the mayor, did mention that there was no card. We make cards. We do have a process. I want people to know that. And it's on the shared drive. And if something's yellow, that means they have not had a second reading. It was yellow. This particular person didn't check that, and the mayor thought he was in the right, and he swore it. So what would we do at this point? We would term it again, because it's he's not a legal member of the Waterfront Trust until he has the second reading, if it goes through tonight. And then I would swear him in tomorrow, the day after. Correct. I'll confirm terms for him. The first one did not.
Right, and just so folks know, as far as the waterfront trust goes, we have a 60-day turnaround time and. Well, so we have a 60-day turnaround time. He did come in at the beginning of May. He did not make the first meeting that we haven't invited him to because of a Zoom conflict. He was on vacation, and this last one, obviously, we had another miss. So with that, motion to approve appointment 402.
Second.
All right, there's further discussion? Roll call.
Roll call on approving Stephen Wallace, Waterfront Trust, 6/1/2026. Council D.
Yes.
Council Camden.
Yeah.
Council Tony.
Yes.
Council Con.
Yes.
Council Lane.
Yes.
Council McCollum.
Present.
Council President.
Yes.
Council Bull.
Present.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Council Shan.
Yes.
Motion passed.
That is it for general governance. Councilor Vogel, licensing permits.
Yes, thank you, Council President. Motion to approve collectively communication 487 and application 144. 487, of course, is our favorite activity during Yankee homecoming, and that's getting through the Market Square and having to pay your tolls into the bucket for the drive. I say that all with tongue in cheek, it does do a great cause. But really, our most favorite of Yankee homecoming, of course, is the Greek Church Festival, and as my fellow councilor at large will testify, she is highly affected by that and enjoys it. So we had an opportunity to talk with the representative from the Greek Church. It was an enjoyable conversation, and we look forward to the festival. All the favorite 3-0 on both of those.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you, Council President. A quick question on firefighters. Is there a reason that they came in as a communication versus an application? You know, they are using our streets, so to speak, and letting us know they're going to use them as opposed to asking is kind of an issue.
Well, I actually thought that itself. If you read the letter, there is a I read it as, you know, your support, you know, appreciated. They requested permission. That's exactly right. That's how, so I read it that way and didn't bother going after it.
Further questions? All right, all those in favor of approving communication 47 and application 144, collectively say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nothing further. That was what?
It's having a blood pressure.
Is having a beetle on it.
Anything else on the license permits?
That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Cameron.
Motion to approve appointment 404 Edward Neumer to the Historical Commission. Thank you. We approved this appointment 3-0 in committee earlier this evening. Mr. Neuer was here and spoke at public comment. He wisely did not decide to stay for the full tour here. He moved to Newburyport about a year ago. He's retired and he has had a career in telecom sales. He had reached out to I think the mayor at some point a year or so ago, just saying he was interested in various committees and, you know, wondering what might be available. He also participated in the board and commission open house several months ago, and he was offered as a nominee for the historical commission. He has listened to several meetings. He's spoken to Glenn Richard. And he's reviewed minutes and other materials online. So, you know, no direct experience in sort of construction, architecture, a lot of the things that we often have, but he's got a lot of time and he's ready to dig in. We asked him a few questions about his interest and he could be a good person to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Further discussion? Roll call.
Roll call on appointment 404. Council D.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Johnny.
Yes.
Councilor Con.
Yes.
Council Lane.
Yes.
Council McCall.
Yes.
Council President.
Yes.
Council Bull.
Yes.
Council Wright.
Yes. And Council Shi.
Yes.
I'll be emailing probably tomorrow, just checking on availability in early mid-July, so we can have a committee of the whole on short-term rentals and other, that will be time sensitive soon, so we can, you know, but whether that's 1 or 2 meetings, so we'll try to get one in quick. That's fine, thank you.
All right. Councilor John, Public Works and Safety.
Thank you, Chair. Please, everybody, bear with me. I've never done this, but I haven't.
No rush.
Motion to collectively approve communication 483 residential HP at 12 Merrill Street and order 469 handicap parking space again at 12 Merrill Street.
Second.
Approved in committee 3-0.
Any discussion? Councilor Lane.
I just wanted to speak to this real quick, because I know the applicant is a good friend of mine. And he actually did this, and he hurt his back saving the girl at Vanguard Key Club who was in grave danger. So I just wanted to commend him for his efforts to save that woman at Vanguard. And that's all.
Councilor Lane. Council President?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to mention, so I have in the past said no to handicap parking spots. I'm gonna be very clear, I'm not against handicap parking spots, especially when they're needed. But my challenge has been in the past that they were not being looked at, I think, for either 10 or 15 years. I particularly like this order because it does have a date of 2029. So I really support that. Thank you.
Further questions? All right, all those in favor, communication 483 and order 469, say aye. Opposed? All right, next comes Donahue.
Okay. Motion to approve order 156, amends chapter 168, parking restriction Fair Street. 2 to 1 in committee.
All right, discussion.
Yeah, I was the person who opposed it. I think I understand what is going on with the resident. You know, it is where they are, they have invested in their sidewalk, but it is our sidewalk, it's his sidewalk. Even though he's made that investment in it. There are trucks turning on that street going forward, and the ask is to remove the cars on the opposite side so the trucks have more way. What I wanted to do is spur the discussion that, you know, 2.5 years ago, the council passed a truck ordinance and a trucking ordinance. These trucks shouldn't be on those roads anyway. And that's part and parcel of this. So while I'm sympathetic to the resident and sympathetic to the sponsor who is trying to solve this problem going forward, the underlying issue is that the council has passed the truck ordinance. We don't know where it is. No one knows how to enforce it, anything like that. And I think that's the bigger issue here. We see it. We saw it elsewhere in the city, or pen and paper, et cetera, along the way. And that's why I opposed it, because I wanted to have this discussion that says, you know what, we need to dig that out, and we need to either get it Mass DOT approved, and we need to make sure that it's on our navigation systems for folks on cutting up through there, et cetera, and disturbing the readings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Collar. Council President.
Yeah, thank you. So I also am opposed to this for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like we have taken up so many parking spots in the downtown core, and you know, we hear often from residents in other contexts, but people that live very much in the vicinity of this, that there just is not enough parking. I mean, Middle Street is just a half a block away there. And I don't want to see us taking away parking spots to solve one issue and just creating more parking issues along the way. I think we should really think of this more holistically. I'm very glad to hear, I wasn't aware, but very glad to hear about these truck routes. And I understand that this may be hard to enforce, but I would much rather see us enforce them, because frankly, if we're taking away these parking spots, we are essentially giving them license to do exactly this and be in the wrong spots, because now that they don't have those cars making it hard for them to make that turn, they're gonna come down that road every time and make that same turn, and we're sending trucks from neighborhoods we've previously said they didn't want to, so I am gonna be opposed to this.
Further discussion. Councilor Cameron.
Just a question, and I'm possibly open to this, but yeah, I think that's a narrow street that no truck should be going there, knowing that it is often hard to get to State Street, and so Essex is a street I use a lot. How many cars is that? So it's 56 feet, we're talking 3?
It's 2. Yeah, you get a 20-foot restriction to the corner.
Correct.
Plus 1 space, so you're losing 1 space.
Just a follow-up question, and I know you don't have every spot memorized in town. I mean, is it the 20, I'm looking at a Google, street view, and it doesn't look like the 20-foot is being observed. If the 20-foot was observed, was enforced, would that provide any relief on that westerly side?
Counselor, the 20 feet has generally been observed. That's from Essex Street heading south towards High Street on Fair Street. And then you come up with 1 remaining space before you get to a driveway. We had actually an on-site visit with Wayne Amroth and Council Donahue and the president.
Okay, but it's going from Essex Street northerly towards on Fair Street, it's on Essex Street, and it's going towards water.
Suddenly, it's confusing. It's going away from the water. Right, so what does it say on the westerly side for distance is running in a northerly direction?
From the intersection.
It should be southerly. That's what that's fine.
So,
It's like,
Okay, which way does it go? Does it go towards High Street or does it go towards the river?
towards High Street.
Okay, so that's definitely where we saw it.
Yeah, my apologies.
and surround and
That's okay.
Secretary, let me fix that. Good, fix that.
Yeah, as amended.
Yeah, that's.
Further discussion. Councilor Vogel.
Yeah, I just, I hear the discussion about eliminating parking places, and I'm just wondering why we don't enforce. Does anybody? Was that discussion in the meeting? We came up with, we don't have an answer? Yes.
If I may, thank you. It was brought up, and essentially, I'm very open to the idea of exploring immediately. How soon we can get Mass DOT to accept what was changed 2.5 years ago and get GPS updated. My actual thought process behind pursuing what I am asking, even with knowing that there are restricted truck routes, is that this can be reverted if we can get Mass DOT to accept our truck routes and we can start enforcing it. It doesn't have to be, taken away forever, but in the meantime, we do need to have some kind of resolve for vehicles to make that radius without driving over our public walkways. It's just that's not good, no matter what, no matter if it's in the sidewalk, it's a city hazard. So I'm more than open to pursuing and personally digging in to how we get MassDOT to accept our truck routes, but until they do, I think this is a fair solution for the situation. And I also would like to add that the space in question, the homeowner, the resident that does live directly in front of it does have off-street parking. So we did make sure we weren't taking something away from someone that is trying to park out their home. Yes, it does beg the question of losing a spot for just general parking. But like I said, I'd be more than open to getting it back if we can pursue the truck route, so I'll deal with that and hope your support on behalf of the resident. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll rise in support with that caveat that we'll go back and look at it. I think I'm familiar with this intersection as well. I'll support the ward councilor and the resident living there with the caveat that we go back and look at it.
Council President.
Yeah, so sorry to be speaking over you, but frankly, it's because we're looking at a picture of this and we're very confused by, well, at least I am for you. But so for a turning radius for that particular spot, the truck would have to be coming off of Essex onto Fair, which Essex is a one-way. You can't come off Essex onto Fair. No, it's a one-way going towards State.
No, I don't think so.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's one way coming towards there.
No, it's one way going towards State.
Maybe I broke the law, but I parked there coming that way. I didn't have a car.
You broke the law.
You will both see.
Is it?
But yeah, so it just, I'm very confused as to why we're moving a space there.
Councilor Z.
Motion to continue to a date certain July, what is it?
Yeah,
14th?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Figure it out offline.
Second,
It's a better use of time
Yeah,
I agree. I agree.
rather than going down.
All right, all those in favor of
Motion to continue to a date certain, which is actually the next meeting, which is
July 14th.
July 14th.
second.
all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
One motion passed, we continue.
Anything else, Councilor Donahue?
Just
Updates.
give you an update. Next regular scheduled meeting, committee meeting is July 18th. Goal is to address roadway items and updated streets and sidewalks plan. And that is all.
Right.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Do the order. Councilor.
Yeah, I just want to mention that on this Thursday at 5 o'clock upstairs in the auditorium, the Board of Health will be hosting the variance request for Colby Farm Lane and development. It is to be posted. I spoke with the health director today. They're waiting for tomorrow to post it, but it will be posted. And for all those who are interested in our previous discussion, it's all coming to a head. There is additional information that will be posted with it. That has been a pre-filing from the applicant along the way. If folks are interested.
If I may just add to that, I will have some additional information to send after additional developments which have occurred regarding that.
Thank you, Chief Staff. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Just the way the beginning to make it look